Congress is hereby called to order. Let us observe a minute of silent prayer. Amen.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the session.
Session is suspended. Green. Di ba may out of the country tayo?
Oo, pwede. So, sa opening.
11 na kami.
Plus ako,
13.
Sino isa? Sino isa?
Budget muna tayo, di ba?
Session issue, sabi.
Ulit tayo.
Motion. Mag-move. Okay. Oo nga, 12 na nga pala. Gumagalaw yung phone ko.
Pero din ang suot at ano.
We ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed. Majority, Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Fontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 47th session, Tuesday, December 13, 2016, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion to dispense with the hearing of the journal of the 47th session of December 13, 2016, and considering the same as approved is hereby approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of a 7-member delegation from the American Council of Young Political Leaders. They are visiting the Senate of the Philippines to familiarize themselves with the political structure, policies, and programs of the Philippine government. And the delegation is led by Ms. Holly Borgon, the Director of Government Affairs of ADT Security Services, and accompanied by representatives of the National Movement of Young Legislators. Also would like to welcome the electronics engineering students from Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Santa Mesa, Manila, headed by Shaira Zenia, Barcelona. Mr. President, we would like to welcome them.
Welcome to the American Council of Young Political Leaders and also to our electronics engineering students. Welcome to all of you to the Philippine Senate.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Secretary, please do the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 13 December 2016, it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House Bill number 64 entitled An Act Strengthening Compliance with Occupational Safety and Health Standards and Providing Penalties for Violations thereof.
Referred to the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
4144, an act amending Section 145 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
400, entitled An Act Establishing a National High School in Barangay Pasong Tamo, Quezon City, Metro Manila, to be known as Emilio Jacinto National High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
938, an act dividing Barangay Tangos in the city of Navotas into two distinct and independent barangays to be known as Barangays Tangos North and Tangos South.
To the Committees on Local Government and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
4469, an act separating the Tublay School of Home Industries Extension in Barangay Tublay Central, Municipality of Tublay, Province of Benguet, from the Tublay School of Home Economics, Maine, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as the Tublay National Trade High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
Can we lower the noise level, please? Refer to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
4524, an act converting the San Rafael National High School in the city of Navotas into a National Technical Vocational High School to be known as San Rafael Technological and Vocational High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
4597, an act establishing a national high school in Barangay Concepcion Dos in the 2nd District City of Marikina to be known as SSS National High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
4598, an act establishing a national technical vocational high school in Barangay Nasisi, City of Ligao, Province of Albay, to be known as Ligao City National Technical Vocational High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
4599, an act establishing a national high school in the city of Pagadian, province of Zamboanga del Sur, to be known as Pagadian City Science High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
Bills on first reading, 1282, an act establishing a special hospital for overseas Filipino workers and their dependents, to be known as Bagong Bayaning Filipino Hospital, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, and Ways and Means and Finance.
1283, an act institutionalizing and enhancing the skills certificate equivalency program of the Civil Service Commission and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development.
Resolution number 253, directing the appropriate Senate committee to inquire in aid of legislation into the foreign loans contracted by the Philippine government within the last 15 years through the conduct of a debt audit. Senators Aquilino, Coco Pimentel, and Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Finance and Economic Affairs.
Committee report. Committee report number 23, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Ways and Means on Senate Bill number 1281 with Senator Pangilinan as author thereof, entitled An Act Instituting the Farmers and Fisherfolk Enterprise Development Program of the Department of Agriculture and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill number 50, sponsor Senator Pangilinan.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, we are in receipt of the joint explanations of the Conference Committee on the disagreeing votes on House Bill 3408. This is the act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2017, and for other purposes. With the permission of the Chamber, may we recognize the Chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, or the Senate panel, Senator Loren Legarda, to give us the highlights of the BICAM report. May I have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
A
before
minute
Senator
suspension.
Legarda?
Ba't mahaba to kung babasa?
Usasahin mo muna yung bag nila. Si Lolo. Crocodile.
Mr. President, is the Sergeant at Arms here? I'm just asking.
Yung level of noise, General.
The Sergeant at Arms here. Ana? We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Senator Legarda, Mr. President.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have a long list to read. However, with the permission of the, well, both majority and minority, they decided that I just submit the whole report into the record to see the increases, decreases, and everything, and just perhaps read just a minute of highlights. And I appreciate your sparing me my voice. So, as chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance, it is my honor to present to the body the Bicameral Conference Committee report on House Bill 3408, or the 2017 General Appropriations Bill. I just wish to put on record just a few highlights under the joint explanation of the Conference Committee report. For example, in the Department of Education, we provided funds for the on-site development of public schools and additional 1,000 cash allowance to all teachers. Additional funds were provided to allow the National Book Development Board also to participate in the book fair and for the production of videos that will help children learn through television. For our state universities and colleges, we provided additional funds for scholarships, capital outlay for all state universities and colleges, including the subsidy for tuition fee for medical students in, I think, 8 state universities which offer medical school. For the Department of Finance, there's a provision for the procurement of various equipment intended to cater to the anti-drug campaign and combat smuggling at the premier airport of the country. For the Department of Health, 1.5 billion additional funds for the Doctors to the Barrio program to enable the Department of Health to hire more health personnel. It includes a provision for the construction of health facilities to provide access to health services, medical assistance to indigents, and MOE to hospitals. The Department of Interior and Local Government, 2.073B, was allocated under the ILG to be used for the implementation of the People's Law Enforcement Board, or the PLEB, the enhancement of local government unit capacity on planning and implementation of LGU projects, for also the training and equipment of firemen, subsistence allowance for prisoners, and the rehabilitation and construction of jail facilities, including, perimeter fence, etc. The PNP also was allocated the acquisition of a helicopter, a state-of-the-art helicopter, to be used for crime prevention and law enforcement activities and implementation of projects in its fight against drugs. In the Department of Justice, there's the construction of a building for the Justice or Judicial Academy, the purchase of equipment for the use of correctional facilities, and additional subsistence allowance for prisoners and operating requirements that will enable the agencies under DOJ to effectively perform its function. The Department of National Defense, 2.8 billion, Mr. President, to fund the various activities of DND that will allow the department to effectively defend the security of our nation from internal and external threats. I can go on and on, but there's a veteran center, Balete Pass, a construction of barracks for our police. Ayan, Ping, lahat dyan, PMA. He can stand and narrate the help to our police and and PMA and the armed forces of the Philippines. In the Public Works, Department of Public Works and Highways, we transferred 8.3 billion from the DPWH to CHED for free tuition fees to all state universities and colleges, so that starting 2017, hopefully all of those studying in state universities and colleges will have free tuition apart from these TUPAP STs, the scholarship tuition fees already lodged under the CHEB. This is an addition, Mr. President. And under the Social Welfare and Development, we're providing 100 million for centenarians and an additional amount for a supplemental feeding program. And also an additional cash grant for rice allowance for the 4-piece program. And we also have under the CHED, 8 billion, which I mentioned, for free tuition fees for all SUCs. I also mentioned the other day, and let me just reiterate, that under the Department of Agriculture, we have the free irrigation for our farmers in the amount of more than 2 billion pesos, Mr. President. We also have for micro enterprises, Mr. President, at almost no interest to the micro enterprises all over the country. There is a 1 billion allocation under the Small Business Corporation. I can go on and on, but I would just like to request that all of these be spread into the record, Mr. President. So, sa susunod na taon po, makikita po natin sa ating bansa na libre na po ang irigasyon para sa ating mga magsasaka. Sa mga nakaraan taon hanggang ngayon po, nagabayad po ang ating mga magsasaka ng kanilang patubig. Kung hindi po magbayad, wala po silang irigasyon. Sa susunod na taon po, libre na po ang kanilang irigasyon. Pangalawa po, maliban sa mga subsidiya na binibigay po ng ating Commission on Higher Education, lahat po na nag-aaral sa mga state universities at colleges ay libre na po ang tuition fee. Kasama po ang Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, ang MSU Tawi-Tawi, MSU Marawi City. Pangatlo po, ang ating mga guro ay may karagdagang 1,000 pisong chalk allowance na tinatawag over and above what they are already receiving. Pang-apat po, i-augment po natin, dadamihan po natin ang ating pag-hire ng ating mga doktor at mga medical workers sa ilalim po ng ating Doctor to the Barrio program. Panglima po, ang ating mga informal sector na tinatawag, invisible population, 8 million of them. Yung mga wala pong kilalang congressman o mayor o senador na kailangan po pong magpalista para humingi ng PhilHealth card. Hindi na po kailangan magpakita ng PhilHealth card. Dapat po, pagpasok po sa isang state-owned hospital, specialty hospital man, gaya ng lung center, or provincial or regional hospital, basta po ang may-ari ay ang estado, ang gobyerno, ay sagutin na po dapat ng PhilHealth dahil tayo po ay nag-allocate para dyan. Maliban po dyan, ang ating pagtugon sa pangangailangan ng capital assistance, yung mga gumagawa ng suman, gumagawa ng bibingkat langgunisa, yan po ay mga micro-enterprises. Hindi naman po makakapasok sa land bank yan o sa DBP. Ito po ay maaring tunghayan ng ating Small Business Corporation kung saan po tayo ay naglagay ng 1 bilyong piso. At sa darating na taon, sa 2018, ay susuportahan ko po yung mungkahi ni Pangulong Duterte na maglagay po ng 1 bilyon piso sa bawat rehiyon for micro-enterprise development. Ilan lang po ito sa mga nabanggit ko: libreng irigasyon, libreng edukasyon, libreng kalusugan, libreng tulong sa mga micro-entrepreneurs para po maibsan ang kahirapan. Maliban po dyan, it goes without saying, we are supporting the President's war against illegal drugs. Thank you very much, Mr. President. With that, I would like to request all our colleagues, including my vice chairs, to help me in affirming this budget, and therefore request that this August chamber, hopefully, we will have the unanimous approval of this national budget crafted in line with the President's 10-point socio-economic agenda. Allow me also, Mr. President, first of all, to thank you for your unwavering trust, confidence, and support. Second, for the hard-working, dedicated vice chairs without whose help I could not have finished this budget. Third, all the members of the chamber who asked very enlightening questions during the plenary discussions that made the budget what it is today. Fourth, Mr. President, the very cooperative and wise and enlightened interventions of our minority leader and members of the minority, whose suggestions we wholeheartedly embraced, and most of which we incorporated in the budget. It was not easy, Mr. President, and we know that there were difficult issues, including the issue of the provision for the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. It's a legal aspect. I've asked the Senate President about it. I believe that the Vice Chair, Senator Lacson, will stand on this issue, but I respect him. He had given me due notice, and his vote on the budget, I believe, will be based on the ARM budget and on the DPWH budget in the ARM without really taking away the hard work that we put into the budget together. I see his smile. It is not a smirk, it is a smile. And so I thank Senator Lacson, regardless of his vote in the budget, Mr. President. I am confident that he knows the hard work we put together in this budget. And so with that, I still hope that we will have the unanimous, if not unanimous, near unanimous approval of our national budget. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
I move to adopt and ratify the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions or votes of the House Bill 3408, and that the text of the joint explanations be inserted into the records of this chamber.
Majority Leader Senator Lacson is raising his
Yes.
hands. Senator Lacson is
Senator Lacson,
recognized.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. With a heavy heart and much hesitation, I am voting against the ratification of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the 2017 national budget. I do so for various reasons, the most compelling of which is the continuing presence of pork barrel allocations in the 2017 General Appropriations Bill yet to be enrolled for the President's approval. Save for the 3.6 billion pesos that still remains in the DPWH budget and divided among the 8 legislative districts of the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, after we transferred the 8.3 billion to the SUCs, I need not provide the details of the other pork allocations. Suffice it to say, Mr. President, I know pork when I see it, when I hear about it, even when I smell it. In the lounge, right here in my office, or right in my office, and elsewhere, during informal discussions and casual conversations with some of our colleagues and congressmen even. Please rest be assured, I do not intend to be indifferent or be different, nor am I being contumacious in this regard. Having said that, I have long been unflinching in this fight, advocacy if you will, against pork in the budget since I earned the title the Honorable Senator from Cavite and the Republic of the Philippines. There's no saying here, Mr. President, that I am not grateful to the chairperson of the Finance Committee, Senator Legarda, not only for adopting most, if not all, of my institutional amendments, but for standing firm on those amendments as if it were her own during the bicameral discussions with the House panel. I wish to thank her for the additional 770 million chalk allowance for the more than 700,000 public school teachers. It may look big, Mr. President, but this amount translates to a mere 83 pesos per teacher per day in additional chalk allowance. The 303 million pesos added to the CHR's budget, 686 million to PIDEA, 545 million pesos to the airlift capability of the PNP, 2.8 billion pesos to the DND AFP, to mention some of them. Lastly, this early, I'm begging the chairman of the Finance Committee's indulgence and our distinguished colleagues that come October or at the onset of the fourth quarter of 2017, I will be as persistent and passionately engaged in the scrutiny of the 2018 General Appropriations Bill once the same is transmitted to this chamber for deliberation. If I may reiterate, I vote no to the ratification of the BICAM report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. President, we may register the vote of Senator Lacson after we vote, Mr. President. So
Now,
I move to adopt.
Yes, you have already moved to adopt, but
Yes.
that will be treated as an objection, so we have to divide the
Yes.
House. We will now divide the House, and the voting Yeah, we have not yet voted, so actually that was an explanation of what which should be treated as an objection. So we will do so. We will vote on the motion to approve the bicameral conference committee report. No, by the raising of hands, just to be sure. Anyway, we will, by the raising of hands. Okay, so those in favor of the motion to approve the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing votes of the two houses on House Bill number 3408, please raise your hand. In favor. You're done? Okay na. Those not in favor, please raise your hand. 2. Okay. The others present will be considered to have abstained. Can I announce the result, please? Hmm? 17? Okay na. 20 tayo talaga yan. Okay. With 17 affirmative votes, 2 negative votes, 1 considered to have abstained, the bicameral conference committee report on House Bill number 3408 is approved. Minority Leader.
Yeah, Mr. President, just a short manifestation. On the part of the minority would like to thank the chairman of the Committee on Finance and all the members of the majority for accepting the many amendments recommended by the minority. So with that, we'd just like to make that manifestation. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 1271 under Committee Report number 17.
Any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider Senate Bill 1271 under Committee Report 17.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity or expression, and providing penalties therefore.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Senator Risa Ontiveros, be recognized.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Ontiveros is recognized to sponsor the said measure.
Salamat po, Mr. President, at magandang hapon. At magandang hapon din po sa mga kasama nating advocates nitong panukalang batas na isusponsor ko. Ang Library Foundation, headed by Mr. Anastasio Marasigan, at ang Babaylanes, headed by Ms. Megan Evangelista. Mr. President, in 2015, when the United Nations High Commissioner was asked to report on discrimination and violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity to the Human Rights Council, the following was noted all over the world. Different states had adopted or strengthened their anti-discrimination and hate crime laws. Some had introduced legal protection for intersex persons. Others had abolished criminal sanctions for homosexuality, allowed marriage and civil unions for same-sex couples, and instituted reforms granting legal recognition of transgender persons. In other countries, programs had been established to ensure that the police, judges, prison guards, medical staff, and teachers were receiving gender and sexuality training, that there were anti-bullying programs in schools, and that shelters had been built to house homeless LGBT youths. These were small developments, Mr. President. Davids of a resistance to a Goliath of widespread and brutal hate-motivated violence, often perpetrated with impunity, and everyday discrimination LGBTIQs face countless times, repeatedly, from the riots at Stonewall Inn in Manhattan, New York, to the shooting spree at Pulse Club in Orlando, Florida, to that little shady bathroom in Cell Zone Lodge in Olongapo City, where Jennifer Laude was found covered with injuries, head leaning against the toilet bowl, drowned to death. This is hate, Mr. President. Unwarranted, violent hate. An irrational prejudice against our fellow human beings, founded on some petty, condescending notion that they should dress like us, act like us, be like us, love like us. A deep-seated hate we refuse to acknowledge and address. The same hate we have been fighting against for 17 long years. Yes, Mr. President, 17 taon na ang Anti-Discrimination Bill o ang tinatawag natin ngayong SOGI Equality Bill. Matagal na tayong nakikipaglaban para sa pagkakapantay-pantay. Mahabang panahon na ang ating pakikibaka. Ngayong hapon, inihahain ko po sa ika-17 Kongreso ang Anti-Discrimination Act of 2016 or an act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity or expression and providing penalties therefore. This Anti-Discrimination Act aims to eliminate all forms of discrimination based on SOGI, list and define discriminatory acts committed in employment, public service, and exercise of profession, in educational or learning institutions, in organizations and associations, in access to medical and health services, in establishments, facilities, utilities, and services, in forced medical or psychological evaluation, in contact with or in custody of law enforcement officers, and other forms of discrimination perpetrated in similar settings. Introduced to Philippine legislation the concept of SOGI, or sexual orientation and gender identity or expression. Mandate the creation of social protection and diversity programs that will protect LGBTIQ's rights and promote equality. Provide for redress mechanisms in police stations, in the workplace, and in the Commission on Human Rights. And ensure that discrimination, stigma, and hate will not hinder anyone from access to education, healthcare, employment, and other fundamental rights. Moreover, Mr. President, this Anti-Discrimination Act will be the compliance of the Philippine government to the obligation imposed upon states by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. It will likewise give life to and uphold our very own Equal Protection Clause in the 1987 Constitution. The principle of non-discrimination is one of the underlying thrusts of a human rights regime, Mr. President. It follows that protecting gays, lesbians, bisexuals, transgenders, queers, and intersex from differential treatment should at least be basic state guarantee. Wala na dapat trans woman, Mr. President, na pinipilit na maggupit lalaki sa opisina. Wala na dapat baklang pinagbabawalang mag-donate ng dugo. Wala na dapat trans na dinedetain sa immigration. Wala na dapat bakla o lesbianang hinaharas at kinikikila ng mga pulis. Wala na dapat batang lalaking mahilig sa kulay pink ang binubuli sa paaralan. The lack of protective laws and supportive policies is obviously not helping. Worse, Mr. President, it is empowering homophobia and affording impunity for perpetrators of human rights abuse. But while other governments choose to respond, Mr. President, we choose to neglect. In the recent vote in the UNHRC to retain the independent expert on discrimination and violence against LGBTIQs, the Philippines abstained. Citing our lack of policy against discrimination, we chose to renege on our human rights obligations. We let hate win and humanity lose. Now, this 17 years worth of struggle is staring us in the face this afternoon, Mr. President. My dear fellow senators, along with our brothers and sisters in the LGBTIQ community who have been living their lives treated differently, mocked, laughed at, stripped of their dignity, just because they have the courage to be who they are, just because they are brave enough to be different. Despite all this, they never lose hope. Sa mga kasama na hindi napagod, hindi sumuko, sa mga umasang, aabot ang Anti-discrimination Bill sa hapong ito, sa harap ng plenaryo ng Senado. Maraming salamat sa inyo. Our long fight against discrimination is fueled by your uncompromising, unyielding, and inspiring belief that a world that is equal and kind is possible, and that somehow, at some point, we will get there. The protection of the dignity of every human person must, without reservation, form part of our national policy. This Anti-Discrimination Act will be our commitment to the fundamental equality of all persons before the law, a fulfillment of our long and overdue promise, human rights for all. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros. Acting Majority Leader, Senator Honasan.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration
Mr.
of
President.
Senate Bill.
Majority Leader. Okay.
To recognize Senator Legarda.
What is the pleasure of Senator Legarda? Co-sponsorship.
Mr. President, I just wanted to associate myself with all the views which were propounded by the chairman of the Committee on Women. I also would like to put on record, Mr. President, that this representation from 2007, I believe, had filed a similar bill which fell not under the Committee on Women, but under the cultural communities. It is the Anti-Ethnic, Racial, Religious, and Sexual Discrimination and Profiling Act, which would include discrimination, prohibiting discrimination on the basis not just of gender identity and sexual orientation, but also religious or indigenous people, etc. So this is actually part of that bill. It is, however, in another committee, in cultural communities, but it touches on discrimination against sexual orientation and gender identity. So I wonder, we'll find out from the legislative department or the secretariat how we are able to include that, but it's already on the floor, so that perhaps in the period of amendment, if the lady senator would agree, although those bills were not heard, we could expand the discrimination not just against sexual orientation, but also against those who discriminate in other respects, only if you agree. However, if you believe it would be easier to pass if it is simply focused first on prohibiting discrimination against sexual orientation, then I would go along with it. For so long, Mr. President, our country has not adopted a clear policy on how we should treat those who are, what's the right thing to say, different, But then again, they're not different. Who is to say who is different and who is not? It is important that we regard each human being as such. Hindi bakla, o lesbian, o babae, o lalaki. As a human being who deserves every basic human right that he or she is entitled to. With that, Mr. President, I would just like to set on record that I agree with Senator Ontiveros. I have a pending bill in another committee. I will coordinate with her committee and with the Secretariat on how, even if it was not heard, the important facets of those bills, not just mine, which cover sexual orientation, can be included in the period of amendment or even in the plenary debates, if possible. Thank you, Mr. President.
The manifestation of Senator Legarda is noted. What's the pleasure of Senator Gordon?
Just a short manifestation, Mr. President.
Go ahead, sir.
In the speech of the gentle lady, she made mention of the fact that there was, or a suggestion that there was discrimination when gays or lesbians give blood. I just want to be sure that the Red Cross is, it is made known that the Red Cross does not discriminate. In fact, the only thing that we do is we screen. Whether you're gay, whether you're lesbian, whether you're man, female, or whatever, we screen, and there are certain qualifications such as age or condition of health. Those are the only things that will not be approved. So I just want to hope that I can ask the gentle lady to correct that and make sure that the Red Cross is not part of it. Thank you.
The manifestation, Senator Gordon, is noted.
Mr.
Senator
President.
Ontiveros?
First of all, Mr. President, I would like to thank the good gentlewoman from Antique, the good Senator Legarda, for her expression of support for the SOGI-specific anti-discrimination bill or SOGI equality bill, which I have just sponsored. And I look forward as well to the progress of the comprehensive anti-discrimination bill currently referred to the Committee on the Committee of Cultural Communities. I appreciate that in our putting together the whole policy framework, that there can be companion measures. And I look forward to the support of the good Senator Legarda and all my colleagues here in the Senate for the soonest passage of the SOGI-specific or the SOGI equality bill. Also, Mr. President, I appreciate the reiteration of the good gentleman from Zambales, chairman of the Philippine Red Cross, of the Red Cross's policy of non-discrimination. I will be very glad to furnish him the specific information about certain blood centers that, contrary to this policy of the Red Cross, and I will review the data. They may not be Red Cross blood centers, but others. I will be very glad to furnish the good gentleman with the data of certain blood centers which our specifically gay compatriots have experienced, have precluded them from donating blood on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity. Thank you very much, Mr.
Just a
President.
further manifestation, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Senator Gordon, go ahead, sir.
There are only two entities in the country that can screen blood and that provide blood and collect blood. This is the government, meaning the Department of Health and their hospitals, and private hospitals that they allow. In fact, I'm against that. I think there should be centralized blood collections and blood, because in the Philippine Red Cross, we've been doing this since 1947. We've been the longest blood providing agency in the whole country, and we're not government. So I just want to make that correction. When you say blood centers, it is really either government or the private hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The good gentleman from Zambales and I have also had several conversations on the session floor because we are both looking forward to passing the bill that the good gentleman has filed on setting up, modernizing the blood bank system in the Philippines, which he has principally authored, and which will be enriched by the long and rich history of the Philippine Red Cross. So I just reiterate my intention, Mr. President, to furnish him with the information that I cited briefly in my sponsorship speech. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we
Majority
move to
Leader.
recognize Senator Grace po.
In connection with this, still?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Poe is recognized.
Just a manifestation. I'd like to thank the good sponsor on the bill. And I'd also like to mention that we filed a similar anti-discrimination bill, but it's a bit more comprehensive, as suggested also by our fellow senator, that it includes other areas of discrimination. But it was referred to the Committee on Culture, the Committee on Cultural Communities. So we are hoping that this can be referred to your committee as well. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will support that comprehensive anti-discrimination bill, whichever committee it is referred to. And I reiterate, I am hoping for the support of the good gentlewoman and all colleagues for this SOGI equality bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1271 under Committee Report Number 17.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1271 under Committee Report number 17.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report Number 19.
Any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report Number 19.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read only the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act establishing the free internet access program in public spaces in the country and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask that the Chairman of the Committee on Science and Technology, Senator Bam Aquino, be recognized.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Bam Aquino is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Maraming salamat, Acting Majority Leader. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, mga kababayan, mga kaibigan. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Today, it's an honor to address you, Mr. President, and distinguished colleagues, to sponsor an audacious policy that will enable us to leapfrog internet access in the Philippines. I stand before you to sponsor Senate Bill number 1277 in substitution of SB numbers 58, 190, 816, and 1050, entitled an act establishing the free internet access program in public spaces in the country and appropriating funds thereof, otherwise known as the Free Internet Access in Public Places Act, which seeks to install free internet access points in public places all throughout the country. Mr. President, mga kaibigan, meet Jose. Jose wishes to escape the city and travel the entire Philippines to discover with his own eyes the wonders of our country. Jose will not let work stop him. He can work remotely and send his reports via email. Jose won't even let his girlfriend stop him. They can always message one another and even go on video call dates while he is away. All Jose is waiting for, Mr. President, is for internet in the Philippines to be available in every island, mountain, and valley. Mr. President, napaka-importante ng internet sa buhay natin. Para kay Jose, ito importante para makapaglibot sa Pilipinas, mag-post ng selfie sa mayon, magtrabaho mula sa kubo, at makipag-online date sa gitna ng mangrove sa Palawan. Para sa iba nating kababayan, ito'y mahalaga para makausap at humingi ng payo mula sa amang nagtatrabaho sa Saudi. Para sa mga call center agent, ang internet ang nag-uugnay sa kanila at kanilang mga kausap abroad. Para po sa mga freelancers, ito'y kailangan para makausap ng maayos ang kliyente at mapadala ang hinihinging trabaho. Para po sa mga negosyanteng Pinoy, ito'y nagagamit sa pagbebenta ng gamit o paghahanap ng mga bagong supplier. Para po sa maraming unemployed, ito importante para makapag-apply sa mas maraming trabaho online. Para po sa mga guro at para sa mga mag-aaral, ang internet ang pinanggagalingan ng research, ng learning materials at makabagong modules. And yet, Mr. President, only about 52.6% of Filipinos have access to internet services. Compared to our neighbors, we are lagging behind in internet access. The same study shows that 81.3% of Singaporeans, 68% of Malaysians, and 60.1% of Thais can access the internet. For this reason, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, it is imperative that we institutionalize this very important platform to improve access to quality internet in the Philippines and provide free internet connectivity in public spaces. This bill, Mr. President, mandates the establishment of the necessary infrastructure, equipment, and end-user platform needed to give all Filipinos free internet access in public spaces. Under this act, all national and local government offices, public schools from elementary to tertiary, public transport terminals, public hospitals, public libraries will have internet access. The DICT will be charged with developing a plan and a timeline for the rollout of this program. They shall also take the lead in coordinating with local government units to ensure the on-ground implementation of the program. And most importantly, Mr. President, the DICT shall be authorized to streamline the process for the application of permits and certificates for the construction of infrastructure and installation of equipment necessary, a major hurdle faced by companies seeking to build internet infrastructure. To address this, Mr. President, national government agencies and local government units will also have the responsibility of coordinating with the DICT and DILG to fast-track these permits and certificates necessary for the program's rollout. They shall be in charge of maintaining and safeguarding the program and its equipment with a designated on-site coordinator. Offering Filipinos free, high-quality internet access in public places is going to revolutionize the way that we go about our day and open our minds to boundless possibilities for how we can make our lives, our families, and our communities better. Mr. President, nung nakarang buwan, nakapunta po tayo sa Bacolod at nabisita po natin ang Alegria Elementary School, kung saan nakilala ko po si Barrief. Siya po yung grade 6 student na member rin ng Student Council. Kasama po siya dun sa aming roundtable discussion, kasama ng mga guro, administrador at mga magulang ng eskwelahang yon. Sa lahat-lahat po, sa dinami-dami na mga kakulangan dun sa kanilang eskwelahan, isa lang po yung kanyang hiniling dun sa aming roundtable discussion. Ang hiniling po niya, sana po meron silang internet connection sa kanilang paaralan para po magawa nila ng mabilis at maayos ang kanilang mga school project. Mr. President, 26% lang po ng ating public schools ang may access sa internet. At yung iba pa po dito, sa 26%, nakakakuha po ng internet gamit ang USB dongle. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, now is the time to invest completely in developing our internet quality and bringing this powerful tool to every port, every station, every park, every museum, and every classroom, more importantly, in the Philippines. Imagine tourist sites with free internet access where travelers from here and abroad can read up on historical sites and post beautiful photos of our country on social media. Imagine our museums with free Wi-Fi and downloadable applications so visitors can learn more about our arts and culture and our history. Imagine strolling through public parks and connecting to free internet so you don't have to worry about whether you're missing out on important emails. Imagine getting last-minute work done at the airport or seaport while waiting to go on your next adventure. And imagine, Mr. President, hundreds of state universities and thousands of public schools with access to world-class learning materials and educational videos, making the most out of the World Wide Web to enhance learning. Kung hindi po ngayon, kailan pa? Ang internet po ay maaaring maging susi sa pag-unlad ng bawat Pilipino at susi po sa pagtupad ng Philippine travel dreams ni Jose. Let's pass the Free Internet in Public Places Act and arm Filipinos with the power of connectivity, the power of information, and the power of education. Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Maraming salamat, distinguished colleagues.
Thank you, Senator Aquino.
Mr. President, the Minority Floor Leader, Senator Ralph Recto, made a reservation to deliver his co-sponsorship speech on the measure. I move to recognize the Minority Leader, Senator Ralph Recto.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Recto is recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our Majority Leader. Mr. President, when the Senate first convened in a rented house near Malacanang 100 years ago, its 24 members were summoned by telegram. or by post, which took days to arrive. Communication was so bad that a Navy boat had to be dispatched from Zamboanga to inform and fetch Senator Buto from Hulo. So it came as no surprise that among the first measures tackled by the members of the First Philippine Senate was how to install a string of wireless telegraph stations across the archipelago. By 1919, due to appropriations authorized by the legislature, the first wireless stations were up and running in Puerto Princesa, Jolo, Zamboanga, Davao, Malabang in Lanao, and San Jose in Mindoro. It was also during that year that the first automatic telephone system came into operation in Manila. 100 years later, here we are in the Senate, still grappling with the unending challenge on how to enable our people to communicate with each other in a way that is fast, cheap, and reliable. The technology may have changed. The copper wires of yesteryears have been replaced by fiber optics, and the smartphone that fits snugly in our pocket is a telegram station, phone booth, cinema house, TV, computer rolled into one. And while we have been able to talk to a man standing on the moon and send commands to a satellite 18 billion kilometers away in space, here on Earth, in this country, many people are still on the wrong side of the digital divide, unable to enjoy the full benefits of ICT, which is sad because broadband ought to be the third utility after water and power. The UN itself has proclaimed internet access as a basic human right. So the above is the apt justification for this bill, for the sovereign to enjoy this right and use it as a tool in the pursuit of employment, education, happiness, and to combat ignorance, fear, poverty, and hunger. Others may deride free public Wi-Fi hotspots as populist-driven conveniences. Sadly, those who embrace this falsehood have not been able to fully grasp the empowering potential of ICT. Because the only way to view free Wi-Fi hotspots, my friends, is to treat them for what they are, as a form of liberation technology. Yes, trolls, fake news purveyors, and manufacturers of weapons of mass destructions ride on the same technology platform. But the damage to individual brains or collective consciousness they inflict is far smaller than the greater good that ICT brings. For every troll farm, there are millions of farmers whose lives have been made better by ICT. And in schools, the online education student gets, hopefully would build up their intellectual resistance to ignorance being aggressively peddled. This bill was envisioned to create Wi-Fi hotspots to do social good, and not for the sole purpose of allowing anyone to post only Instagram photos or selfies on Facebook. This will be set up in public hospitals so that if you're the son of an OFW in Italy, you can update your mom via Viber on the recovery of a loved one who has been stricken ill. Or if the hospital staff would like to transmit a patient's data, then there's a facility for that as well. This will be set up in schools to enrich learning so that both teachers and students could tap into the infinite sources of knowledge available online, and in libraries to promote reading. This will be set up in airports so that the loud brass band waiting for you would be advised to keep it down because your flight is delayed as usual. This will be set up in MRT stations so you can message your hot date with sad emoticons that you will be late because one of the last struggling coaches of MRT has broken down again. This will be set up in municipal halls so that if you're applying for a license or permit in one of the offices and you forgot to bring one requirement, a photocopy can be immediately emailed to you. This will be set up in public offices with the largest clientele and the longest queue so that their inconvenience won't be aggravated by a missing document which can henceforth be transmitted. But the real reason, actually, is that one of the things that can pacify a mob waiting to happen is free Wi-Fi. This will be set up in trading centers so that farmers will be apprised of market developments so they can get the best money out of their produce. This will be set up in police stations so that when distress calls come in by text, mas mabilis pa sila sa alas 4 at hindi sila darating bukas ng alas 4. This will be set up in the planned network of one-stop shop centers for OFWs. So if they'll need documents from other offices or from their waiting employers, they can just punch these letters into their phones. PM me this, please. Mass-wise services form part of the ICT solutions, which can ease the pain caused by the many problems we confront today, if not make them totally go away. If roads are clogged with traffic, then the information highway provides a detour. That way, energy is saved, pollution is reduced, and mass sanity is preserved. Kung matraffic, mag-telecommute. Kung malayo ang ospital, ang doktor ay napapalapit sa pamamagitan ng telemedicine. Kung malayo ang paaralan, may distance learning na sa computer pinapadaan. In the same way that need is the mother of invention, or demand ushers in efficiency, or mass use triggers innovation, it is hoped that big government investments in free Wi-Fi spots would nudge forward the upstream reforms in the telecom sector we all would like to see. This begins with improving internet speed. How come that it is faster in the ruins of Aleppo, or it races in Afghanistan in the land of the Taliban, while here in our Senate offices in the texting capital of the world, it crawls that downloads trickle in Tetris speed. Internet penetration is high, but speed is low. 60 million out of 101 million Pinoys have some sort of connection. 4 in 10 cell phone users have broadband subscription, compensating for the low 3.5% fixed line subscription rate. Yet we are oppressed by the 7th slowest broadband, 3G, 4G speed in the world. What are these reforms? Mary Grace Mirandilla Santos, an ICT policy researcher, enumerates some. Adoption of the open access model, updating laws and regulatory framework to promote investment and innovation in communications and technology. Leveling the playing field, updating and upgrading the country's ICT strategy and plan, improving spectrum management, ensuring the competitiveness of the telecommunications industry. The prescriptions are in the particulars. Let me cite a few. Offering of non-discriminatory terms for service providers or equal access charges for clients across the board is one. Local IP peering is another. This would entail supporting growth of open, neutral IXPs where all players are treated equally. There can be shared towers and utility corridors to lower cost for all players. Government can lease assets such as fiber optic cables, poles, or carrier-neutral passive infrastructure. There should be a transparent allocation process of spectrums with clear criteria for assignment, valuation mechanism. Cruz calls it the use it or lose it approach, and the refarming of spectrum resources. Anti-competitive practices must be stopped, and NTC must be remodeled into a truly regulatory and not a captive agency. How do we let thousands of free Wi-Fi spots bloom? By fixing the upstream first. If this bill will provide the gateway and the impetus for reforms propelled by the critical mass of users, then it is the greatest value service it can provide. The bottom line is, we cannot divorce the subject of this bill with the larger business environment under which it will be built. This bill goes beyond installing taxpayer-funded free Wi-Fi spots, like the creation of the DICT. It forms part of the must-dos to future-proof our country. It is one of the important apps for tomorrow. Our capacity to create jobs, grow our economy, train skilled people, and feed our country will rest on our ability to expand our ICT capability, open Wi-Fi spots included. It has been said that a 10% increase in broadband penetration can lead to 1.38 increase in the gross domestic product. Another study showed that a 0.5 Mbps increase in internet speed hikes household income by $800 per year in less developed economies. ICT-reliant companies provide the third largest source of dollars after electronics and OFW remittances. BPOs, the call centers, the back offices, medical transcription, game development, creative process outsourcing, to name a few, employ 1 million Filipinos. More if ancillary services are included. 1 in 4 jobs today are occupied by knowledge workers. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, if we want to meaningfully celebrate the 100th year of this institution, then let it be through important laws passed that will be remembered 100 years from now. This bill is definitely not on top of the list, not even in the first page of the catalog of must-pass legislation, but in this broad spectrum of bold and brave new laws. It has its special place. More so if government will leverage its Wi-Fi and other ICT-related expenditures to crowbar the lifting of the heavy lid that blocks the full enjoyment of our people of a service that has been declared a human right. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask my colleagues to support this measure.
Thank you, Senator Recto. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report Number 19.
Majority Leader, Senator Poe is asking for the floor. What's the pleasure of Senator
May
Poe?
we move to recognize Senator Grace Poe.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I'd also like to manifest my support and to thank Senator Aquino for sponsoring the measure and also for the manifestation of Senator Recto. We've been around the country and I filed a bill supporting a free internet program for every public school, particularly the state universities and colleges. The information that you can gather from the internet, as we know, is even more than 10 times the Library of Congress. So we will be in equal footing with children all over the world or students all over the world if we only had reliable access. So again, I would like to manifest that my bill, which is instituting a free Wi-Fi service in all public schools, particularly the state universities, which is referred to the Committee on Education, hopefully be transferred to the Committee of Science and Technology.
Do you want,
We also filed a resolution on the slow internet service. That's all, Mr.
do
President.
you want to formalize that transfer through a motion?
Yes, Mr. President.
To be made by the Majority Leader in due time. Majority Leader, Senator Pangilinan is also raising his hand.
We move to recognize Senator
Thank you.
Pangilinan.
Senator Pangilinan is
Yes,
recognized.
just to place on record, Mr. President, that we also filed a similar measure and that we be allowed to submit our co-sponsorship speech to the Secretariat so that it can be placed on record, Mr. President. Thank you.
The manifestation is noted. Senator Villanueva?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to put on record that this representation will fully support the measure being sponsored by the Chair, Senator Bam Aquino, and this will perhaps be a prerequisite of our bill pending here in the Senate, which is Senate Bill number 1033, institutionalizing telecommuting from home, work from home, anywhere in the workplace. Mr. President, I think this is very important as we are seeing a lot of developments in the IT BPM sector, especially in the medical transcription sector. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you for that manifestation. Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to commend the sponsor, Senator Bam, of the Chairman of Science and Technology, the Minority Leader. We'd just like to state for the record, I don't know if the Chairman or the Chairperson of the Finance Committee was able to state it in the highlights of the 2017 budget. There's actually 3 billion already allotted for free Wi-Fi all over the Philippines under the budget of the DICT. And this initiative was begun in the 2016 budget when now Minority Leader, then Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, who headed the budget of the, if it's not the ICTO, it's the DOST. So just to place that on record, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you for that manifestation. The sponsor is once again recognized, Senator Aquino.
Just a quick manifestation, Mr. President. I'd just like to thank all my colleagues for their support for these two bills. Yesterday, we also got a lot of support for the Pagkain Pinoy bill. And today, Mr. President, a number of our colleagues again supported this free internet access in public places act, Mr. President. So I'd just like to manifest my gratitude for everyone. Dare I say, Mr. President, it's a Christmas miracle. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Aquino. We can go back now to the motion made by the Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, to repeat, Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report number 19.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Senate Bill 1281 under Committee Report number 23.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider Senate Bill 1281 under Committee Report number 23.
Any objection?
Farmers
There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read only the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
Sponsorship.
An act instituting the Farmers and Fisherfolk Enterprise Development Program of the Department of Agriculture and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask that the Chairman of the Committee on Agriculture and Food, Senator Francis Pangilinan, be recognized.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Pangilinan is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. To our colleagues in the Senate, magandang hapon. This is to sponsor Senate Bill number 1281 under Committee Report number 23, an act instituting the Farmers and Fisherfolk Enterprise Development Program of the Department of Agriculture and for other purposes, otherwise known as or called the Sagip Saka measure. This is in substitution of Senate Bill number 50. Mr. President, in 2011, this representation as chairman of the Committee on Agriculture visited on official mission Shandong province in China. Precisely, we went there to observe agricultural modern practices of China in that province, Mr. President. I noticed, Mr. President, during our 10-day stay in 4 areas, 4 cities in Shandong province, one evening, Mr. President, I was watching television in the hotel, and I noticed several CCTV, the China Central TV stations. It's actually the government station in China, and CCTV has several stations, one dedicated to education, one dedicated to the news, one dedicated to sports. And what I noticed, Mr. President, that evening as I was watching, one particular CCTV channel was dedicated to, if you will believe it or not, Mr. President, agriculture and national defense. I was wondering why agriculture and national defense was combined in one CCTV channel. The following day, Mr. President, I asked the representative of the Ministry of Agriculture, why is it that you have agriculture and national defense in one CCTV channel? And then he said, very simply, with 1.3 billion people, if your people are hungry, food security for us is national security. That's how important agriculture is to the Chinese People's Republic. So much so, Mr. President, that he said, if we cannot feed 1.3 billion people, he went on to say, we would have many Chinas. Because historically also, every time, as far as ancient China history is concerned, every time there is a famine, it is followed by regime change. And so that is how important the Chinese government and the Chinese, the nation values agriculture. Mr. President, in 2012, when I was chairperson of the committee on Congressional Oversight Committee on the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization, I, together with Senator Sergius Menya, visited Thailand. Also, for the purpose of looking at latest farm technologies and farm practices in Thailand, Mr. President. In Thailand, Mr. President, the late king said that the backbone of the nation is the farmer. Again, putting a premium on agriculture and farming in their country. Which is to say that if the backbone is weak, Mr. President, then their nation cannot stand upright. Mr. President, I cite these two experiences in two different countries to compare and contrast to how we in the Philippines look at farming and agriculture. Mr. President, sa Pilipinas, sa halip na bigyan ng kahalagahan ang pagsasaka at pangingisda, hindi natin binibigyan ng importansya at yung balita po nung isang araw na na-dismiss yung kaso laban sa dating undersecretary ng agriculture na fertilizer scam, talaga pong nakakalungkot na hindi na nga binibigyan ng importansya at halaga ang ating mga magsasaka, hindi tulad sa ibang bansa ay ninanakawan pa at hindi pa makakamit ng katarungan. Mr. President, dito sa Pilipinas, ang tingin natin at tingin na rin ng mga magsasaka sa sarili nila ay mababa lamang. Sabi nga nung isang magsasaka, ako'y magsasaka lamang. Sabi pa nga niya, kausap niya yung kanyang anak, 3 o 4 ang kanyang anak. At sabi po niya sa isang anak niya, total anak, mahina ka naman sa math, huwag ka na mag-college, dito ka na lang, ikaw na lang ang magsaka. Ibig sabihin, yung mga magagaling doon pupunta sa kolehiyo, yung hindi magaling dito na lamang sa sakahan. Nakakalungkot na napakababa ng tingin natin ng ating mga sarili sa ating pagsasaka. This is precisely why, Mr. President, this measure, the act instituting the Farmers and Fisherfolk Enterprise Development Program of the Department of Agriculture and for other purposes, is about addressing the poverty that has long plagued our farmers and fisherfolk. It is about having an integrated approach to agriculture and fisheries development with a goal of improving the lives, the incomes, and livelihoods of the principal stakeholders, the farmers and the fisherfolk. Mr. President, in the confirmation hearing of Secretary Piñol yesterday at the Commission on Appointments, he said that the average farm income today is 4,000 pesos a month. That is around 48,000 pesos a year. NEDA statistics show that for a family, an average family's income to be able to provide for basic needs on a monthly basis is a little over 6,000 pesos. In other words, if you're earning 4,000 pesos a month and you need to have 6,000 pesos a month to meet your daily needs, clearly our farmers are not being able to meet their daily needs. They remain poor.
mas mabuting buhay, kabuhayan at mas mataas na kita para sa ating magsasaka at mangingisda. Yan ang nais nating makamit sa pamamagitan ng panukalang batas na ito. We need to cut the centuries-old chains that bind our farmers and fishers to poverty and all the attendant societal ills that it brings, such as crime, diseases, and social tension and unrest. We need to save agriculture and fisheries for the farmers and the fishers, for ourselves because we eat, and for our society because we want to end poverty among those who feed us. Sabi nga nung anak kong si Frankie, nung siya po nga, nabanggit ko na dito nung budget debates, uulitin ko po, nung siya po ay 9 years old. Sabi niya, we should treat our farmers like our parents because they're the ones who feed us. Kailangan natin sagipin ang pagsasaka at pangingisda sa pamamagitan ng pagsagip sa mga magsasaka at mangingisda. The idea behind the bill is to institutionalize the Sagip-Saka program, and I will explain this later, and bring all the inputs farmers and fishers need so that they can organize themselves. Learn the full value chain from production to financing, to crop insurance, to technologies, and to business development, particularly marketing, and apply all these and improve their standard of living and their incomes. The Farmers and Fisherfolk Enterprise Development Program builds on and consolidates the principles of the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Plan and the Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprise Development Plan. Integrated and comprehensive are the two adjectives that best describe the bill, as it brings together government and the private sector to help enable farmers and fisherfolk and fishers for them to grow. Mr. President, average age ng farmers is 56 years old, average income, wala pa hong 50,000 pesos a year, at ang average educational attainment, grade 4. Kung hindi ho tayo magkakaroon ng aktibong intervention, ika nga, sa pagsuporta sa kanila, ay mananatili po silang naghihikahos. If we do not actively intervene and provide the necessary support system for our farmers considering their plight, they will remain poor and we will continue to be a country plagued with poverty. This program seeks to end the practice of separate agriculture and fisheries programs and bring a holistic, multi-sectoral approach to providing what our farmers and fishers need. Halimbawa, kailangan ng karaniwang Pilipinong magsasaka hindi lang matutong mag-multi-crop, kailangan din niyang mag-alaga ng baka o baboy o manok, kailangan niyang matuto ng basic accounting at bookkeeping, kailangan niyang malaman ng market. Pero ngayon, hiwa-hiwalay ang mga programang ito. Layo nitong panukalang batas na magkaroon ng pagtutok sa magsasaka at mangingisda, pag-isahin ang mga programang kailangan ng magsasaka at mangingisda, depende sa marami niyang mga pangangailangan para makaahon siya sa kahirapan. From the norm of subsistence farming, which is the general rule today among our farmers, we must move away from this norm and move towards farm enterprise management and development. The bill seeks to mobilize capital to the producer, the farmer and the fisherfolk. Naalala ko ang kwento ng isang magsasaka sa Maguindanao. Siya po ay nagtatanim ng kalabasa, 1 hektarya at kalahati ang kanyang lupain. Ang benta sa kanya, ang bili sa kanya ng middleman ay 5 piso 1 kilo ng kalabasa. Pero yung wet market na wala pang kalahating oras mula sa kanyang sakahan, pagka bumili na ay 25 pesos na 1 kilo. Times 5, wala pang kalahating oras ang layo. Pero kanino napupunta yung times 5? Hindi po sa magsasaka. Pero sino po ang naghirap? Sino po ang nagbanat ng buto? Yung farmer po, pero talaga hong binabarat. We will be able to do capital mobilization to the producer through a multi-sectoral approach. The government, the private sector, the local government units, farmer and fisher groups working together with the government, creating the environment conducive to investments in agriculture and fisheries. Government, through its various agencies, shall mobilize resources around farmers and fishers to build their capacity. Through various incentives and exemptions,
including in the procurement and taxation processes, both government and private sectors shall be encouraged to directly purchase from accredited farmers and fisherfolk cooperatives and enterprises. For instance, the feeding program of the DSWD and can now buy directly from farmers and fishers. And I believe the Pagkaing Pinoy Act will likewise provide the markets for our farmers, because governments and the LGUs could be allowed to buy directly from the farmers and the fisherfolk and their enterprises. Mr. President, Sagip Saka was a program we launched when we were chairman of the Committee on Agriculture in 2010. We partnered with the private sector, we partnered with the local governments. One such partnership was with Jollibee Foundation. Jollibee Foundation would purchase 60% of its requirements of onions to a farmers cooperative, for example, in San Jose City, Nueva Ecija. Because they started in 2008. The first purchase of Jollibee with the Kalasag Farmers Cooperative was 60 tons. They did not buy all, the 100% yield or harvest of the farmers. They allowed the farmers to bring 40% of their produce to the markets. After 4 years, Mr. President, they were already harvesting 240 tons of onions. Today, Mr. President, the same farmers organization, the same partnership with the private sector, with the Jollibee Foundation, they are now harvesting 500 tons. It used to be 30 hectares, they are now 50 hectares. Yung mga magsasaka nung Kalasag Farmers Cooperative, kung hindi motorsiklo, meron na silang motorsiklo, meron na silang tricycle. Yung mga misis nung mga magsasaka, natubos na yung kanilang mga alahas dahil yun ang una nilang sinasanla para makapagpautang, para mapuno yung kanilang mga gastusin. Mr. President, also another partnership sa GIPSACA was with Nestle Philippines, this time for coffee farmers in Bukidnon and Agusan. After 2 years of partnership with Sagip-Saka, with our office, with the Department of Agriculture and Nestle Philippines, these farmers in Bukidnon and Agusan, after 2.5 years, had already doubled their income from coffee farming. Mr. President, we want to institutionalize private sector government partnerships and focusing and mobilizing resources around farmers, communities, and organizations. Ang ating magsasaka ang nagtatanim, pero hindi po sila ang tunay na nag-aani. Hindi pa. Sa pamamagitan ng panukalang batas na ito, nais nating mayangat ang kabuhayan nila. At pag nangyari na po yun, aangat na din ang kabuhayan at kasarinlan ng buong bayan. Maraming salamat po at we urge our colleagues to support this measure. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues.
Mr. President, we move to recognize Senator Cynthia Villar.
Senator Villar is hereby recognized.
I have no voice, but I just want to manifest something, and I'll make the interpellation later next year if I have the voice. Anyway, ang problema po ng Department of Agriculture, pag tinitingnan nyo yung budget nila, lahat pumupunta sa overhead. So ako, pag gumagawa ako ng bill, I refrain from creating additional agencies. Kasi pag nag-create ka ng additional agencies, the appropriation will go to the agency for their overhead rather than benefiting the farmers directly. So I would suggest that if we make a final amendment of this bill, let's find out the agencies doing this already and make a convergence para lahat ng perang ibibigay natin pupunta na sa mga farmers, not in creating overhead for the Department of Agriculture. When I reviewed their budget a few years ago, 60% of the budget goes to overhead and 40% goes to the program. So I would suggest that when we make bills, it be entitled programs rather than agencies so that the money will go to the program, not to the agencies. Yun lang po ang aking manifestation. Maraming salamat po.
The manifestation is hereby noted. Majority Leader,
Mr. President, we move to recognize Senator Bam Aquino.
Senator Bam Aquino is hereby recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, this will be very brief. As a member of the Committee on Agriculture, I wish to also co-sponsor this measure, but instead of reading it out today, may I just move that it be inserted into the records accordingly, Mr. President.
The explanation of the gentleman, or the sponsorship of the gentleman, will be read into the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1281 under Committee Report Number 23.
Any objection to the motion? The period to give our colleagues time, we suspend consideration of the measure.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Additional reference to business committee reports, committee report number 24. Prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Public Services, Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, and Finance on Senate Bill number 1284 with Senators Drilon, Joseph Victor, Ejercito Cayetano, Win Gatchalian, Recto, Grace Po, and Subirias, authors thereof, entitled An Act Compelling the Government to Address the Transportation and Congestion Crisis through the grant of emergency powers to the President, recommending its approval and substitution of Senate Bill numbers 11-154999 and 1067, taking into consideration PS Resolution numbers 31, 33, 59, 63, 76, and the privileged speeches of Senators Zubiri and Joseph Victor Ejercito, the sponsor, Senator Grace Po.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report Number 25, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Government, Corporation, and Public Enterprises, and Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development on Senate Joint Resolution Number 5 with Senators Recto, Joel Villanueva, Trillanes D. Cynthia A. Villar, Joseph Victor Ejercito, Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay, Ligarda, Soto III, Subiri, Richard J. Gordon, and Win Gatchalian as authors thereof, entitled Joint Resolution Increasing the Monthly Pension of the Social Security System Pensioners under the Social Security Act of 1997, recommending its approval and substitution of Senate Bill numbers 6391, 145, 150, 181, 400, 1068, 1129, 1198, and 1236 is sponsored Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 1284 under Committee Report Number 24.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider Senate Bill 1284 under Committee Report Number 24.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, may we ask the Secretary to read only the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act compelling the government to address the transportation and congestion crisis through the grant of emergency powers to the President.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask that the Chairman of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Grace Po, be recognized.
Any objection? There being none, Senator Poe is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President, sa ating mga kasama, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. I stand here before you to sponsor Senate Bill number 1284, or an act compelling the government to address the transportation and congestion crisis through the grant of emergency powers to the President. This bill is a consolidation of Senate bills filed by Senators Drilon, Cayetano, Ejercito, and Gatchalian. We also took into consideration the inputs from all concerned government agencies, the academe, and stakeholders, and recommendations from transportation and urban planning experts. It has come to a point where we plan our lives on how heavy the vehicular traffic will be, and for millions, gridlock in our streets has become a painful constant. We don't need statistics to prove how traffic has gone from bad to worse in Mega Manila. Cars move in a glacial pace. the only hope for fast mode of travel in the metropolis. The trains have been derailed by lack of machines and old equipment, poor maintenance, and the greatest culprit that slows them, bureaucratic inertia. People, including children who should still be asleep, now wake up before dawn to catch an MRT train only to realize that the time to queue for a ticket is now longer than the train ride itself. And they who rise before sunrise have to go through a harrowing commute just so they can be home by midnight. As they often post in memes and in social media, pumasok sa tren na bagong ligo, lalabas na tila mandirigma galing sa isang gera. People tend to lose their whole day's energy even before they set foot in their offices or schools. The sad reality is that for many, the time spent for rest is less than the time spent on the road. The bus has become their bedroom. It is no longer true that it is faster to fly across the ocean than to drive across town. As anyone who had recently taken a flight out of Naiya would tell you, sometimes the time spent by a plane queuing to take off is longer than the actual flight itself. Worse, the flight delays and the duration of said delays have become a norm, undermining each and every passenger's personal schedule or time. To be sure, a lot of opportunities, events, and occasions have been missed or lost by thousands of passengers, and anyone flying in gets a free aerial tour of Metro Manila as planes waste time and fuel oscillating before their given clearance to land. And traffic is not just a Metro Manila disease, it is a virus engulfing the nation. Metro Cebu is showing the classic symptoms of long commutes and bumper-to-bumper traffic. Baguio is another, where once you can stop to smell the flowers or the pine trees, now traveling within the city is more stop than go, where you can only smell the fumes. Today's Holy Land, as they call it, Davao, is grappling with traffic too. So are Iloilo, Cagayan de Oro, Lipa, Naga, and many places in Laguna and all other big and major cities in Central and South Luzon. When commerce and commuters move in a pace that is slow and unsafe, the toll is high. In economic losses, health costs and productivity decline. One estimate pegs at 876 billion pesos the annual economic cost of traffic in Metro Manila alone. Traffic does not only drain gas tanks, it zaps out our energy and makes us feel happy. Traffic does not only break down cars, but sabi nga ng mga millennials, break up relationships na rin. The culprit, Mr. President, is our inability to expand and develop our mass transport system and our inability to immediately implement already existing plans for infrastructure and transportation management. We do not have a lack of plans, but a lack of action people who do more and talk less. We depend heavily on private transportation. We junked our rails for wheels. We sold for scrap our trains, which could ferry thousands and build roads to make room for more sedans. At its peak, the Philippine railway system stretched 1,140 kilometers in 3 islands. Now, we only have 43 kilometers of rails. In the absence of people movers, people had no choice but to find their own ride. And today, that Pinoy diskarte is used to scrape together enough money for a down payment for a car that will be amortized in many gives. Mr. President, people are forced to pay for their desired convenience. This year alone, the number of four-wheel vehicles sold in the country is forecast to reach or even breach 400,000 units. If 1 in every 3 cars will ply Metro Manila streets, then all these brand new cars would fill not just 1, but 2.5 lengths of EDSA from Monumento to MOA, both sides all lanes, bumper to bumper, 2.5 times. Or you can compute it this way. All cars sold in Metro Manila in 4 months and 3 weeks could fill both sides of EDSA. Just 4 months. Car travel is inherently insufficient. It costs at least the Philippines 750,000 pesos to transport a person from one point to another by car. Furthermore, a car occupies at least 13 square meters of public space, even if it is carrying only one person. Car travel accounts for 30% of trips, but accounts for 72% of road traffic. What we need are vehicles that carry more people. Thus, we want our people to rely on public transportation. Sadly, this is not the case. A long train of bad ideas, bankrupt programs, botched projects, and lack of meaningful foresight has made it an accident waiting to happen. The perfect train wreck upon which the well-being and welfare of the Filipino people is fighting for survival. It is now time to untangle the mess, one that is so grave and great that it needs emergency powers to straighten it out. What is disappointing, Mr. President, is it appears that the burden to solve the traffic crisis is now on us. Bigla na lang idinadahilan ng mga taga-executive department na hindi sila makakilos ng mabilis dahil wala silang emergency powers. Many solutions do not require legislation. In fact, the laws are there. The plans are there, if only they are implemented. Hindi lahat ng solusyon nangangailangan ng semento. Kadalasan, sentido común lang ang kulang. To them, I say, get off your office chairs and act now. You should inspire the people to have confidence in you, and that will only happen if your actions will spur results. Nonetheless, we are granting emergency powers to the President because losing 3 billion pesos a day due to traffic is alarming enough to constitute a crisis. This is especially true given the independent JICA estimates that by 2030, estimated losses will increase to 6 billion pesos a day. Congress needs to declare a national emergency with regard to traffic congestion because traffic from highly urbanized areas is now spilling over to nearby localities and causing businesses and people to lose money and opportunities. In figures, around 12.8 million trips are made in Metro Manila every day, which is a lot, considering that Metro Manila has less than 1 kilometer of road for every 424 vehicles. Currently, 50% of Metro Manila's road networks are operating near saturation level at the volume or capacity ratio of 0.80% at an average speed of 20 kilometers per hour. To address the traffic crisis, our bill declares as state policy the adoption of comprehensive and effective measures that will immediately create a transportation system that is fast, safe, secure, efficient, viable, competitive, dependable, integrated, environmentally sustainable, people-oriented, and inclusive. In short, it defines the problems and prescribes the cure. By granting emergency powers to the executive branch, we can achieve the following. Number one, harmonization or harmonized traffic laws of LGUs and the national government. Number two, provide for the use of alternative methods of procurement under already our existing procurement law or RA 9184. Number three, compel, empower, and capacitate the executive branch to implement existing plans, the 3-year rolling infrastructure program of the NEDA, the JICA plans approved by the NEDA. Number four, compel, empower, and capacitate the executive branch to create and implement a short to mid-term plan known as the Traffic Action and Decongesting Plan to specifically address the traffic and congestion crisis we are now experiencing, a harmonized traffic regulation. Achieving the above requires a focal person who will be the lead implementer of powers conferred. This will be the Traffic Crisis Manager. The Traffic Crisis Manager shall be appointed by the President and shall have cabinet rank and pay privileges of a department secretary. He shall have the opportunity to formulate, coordinate, and implement land, air, and seaport traffic plans, projects, and programs. He may open private roads, clear sidewalks, and override LGU ordinances that are counterproductive in easing traffic in Metro Manila. But the traffic crisis manager cannot just enter the fray without knowing what he has to do. Thus, we cannot simply build without planning, for you will end up with a Lego city built by toddlers. You want order, organization, and flexibility in building a city and in connecting regions. So the first question is there a plan? The DOTR could not give us a straight answer, so we shall give it to them. Yes, there are already existing plans. We do not have a lack of them. For short-term infrastructure projects, we have the 3-year Rolling Infrastructure Program, or TRIP, which consists of plans submitted by various agencies and already approved by the NEDA. We don't understand why from the very beginning the DOTR did not reference to this. For long-term projects, we specified in our bill the roadmap for transport infrastructure development for Greater Metro Manila and the roadmap study for sustainable development for Metro Cebu. The 3-year Rolling Infrastructure Program, however, will simply be part of the Traffic Crisis Action and Decongestion Plan. This plan encompasses not just infrastructure, but also programs and projects that aim to immediately address the traffic crisis. Programs and projects under the Traffic Crisis Action and Decongestion Plan include route rationalization, creating a uniform traffic code that will harmonize all laws related to traffic management, managing the volume of users in gateway seaports and airports to avoid decongestion, and modify, revise, amend, suspend, or revoke franchises, among others. What about other cities like Davao, Cagayan de Oro, Iloilo, Lipa, etc.? Remember when I emphasized the importance of having a plan? These cities do not have a master plan yet. We cannot simply build a flyover and take it down later because we want to build a BRT. The emergency powers will empower the executive branch to start feasibility studies on these areas. We are now compelling them to actually have a legitimate study because they have none in many areas. However, for immediate relief, the traffic crisis manager may implement similar systems and mechanisms, such as implementing a teleworking scheme, clearing of sidewalks, designation of PUV terminals, etc. in many areas. While this sets the parameters for the projects to be implemented, it gives the implementers more than enough latitude to maneuver, provided that they are within fixed parameters. So what does this bill prescribe, Mr. President? It sets a rules-based exercise of emergency powers. The Constitution does not permit the executive to write its own emergency power in a DIY fashion. It is in obedience to the Constitution that we have made the emergency powers time-bound, targeted, transparent, task-oriented, and technology-aided. Time-bound, because emergency powers given to the President must have an expiry date. Without this, the element of urgency is lost. Why call it an emergency if we do not demand for immediate or urgent solutions? Our bill uses the language of the Constitution that limits the grant of emergency powers to the next adjournment of session, which is June 2019. Second, it is targeted because it specifies the areas where it would and may be applied. In this case, the implementation of the infra projects subject to an existing plan covers Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, and their adjoining towns and cities. However, this does not preclude the creation of a master transportation plan for other areas, especially highly urbanized cities and municipalities that are already suffering from traffic congestion. Third, it is transparent because these are emergency powers to solve problems and not to borrow a term popular years ago, emergency powers to steal. The power to expedite projects is not a license to contract expensive projects with kickbacks. Our bill requires the publication of everything that has to do with the use of emergency powers, from the policies crafted through this act down to the updates on projects being implemented. It is also task-oriented because although the weight of this act falls heavily on the traffic crisis manager, it empowers him to create an interagency task force and designate action officers from both the national and local government. Hindi naman Superman si traffic crisis manager at lalong hindi siya ang Diyos. Thus, the bill retains the mandate and duties of specific agencies such as the DPWH, MMDA, NHA, and LGUs. It also creates a Traffic Crisis Advisory Council, which is composed of not just the pertinent government agencies, but also members of the academe, non-government organizations, technical experts, and representatives from transport and commuter groups. As the powers given are great, so are the sanctions for their abuse. Any violation or non-compliance with any provision in the Act shall be considered a violation under the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act and shall be penalized with imprisonment of 1 to 10 years and shall be perpetually disqualified from holding public office. Kung merong pong pasaway na local government official na ayaw makisama sa centralized regulation dahil sa politika o ano paman, ito po ay violation at pwede na siyang ma-disqualify perpetually from running for public office. Kailangan pong makisama tayo dito para sa ikabubuti ng ating bayan. Kaya yung mga pasaway sa gobyerno na ayaw maging team player at nagpapahirap sa pagpapatupad ng mga proyekto na makapagpapabilis sa daloy ng trapiko ay mapaparusahan. Ang mga barangay captain na hindi tumutulong para maayos ang trapiko sa lugar nila at hindi nagpapaalis ng mga illegally parked cars ay maaari ding kasuhan. Paano naman yung nagnanakaw o kumukuha ng kickbacks? Our law also provides that if they violate an already existing law such as the Revised Penal Code or any special act, then the maximum penalty shall be imposed. Lastly, our emergency powers bill is technology aided because if we will not tap the best solutions science can offer, then we will be applying more of the same ineffective cures. Faster internet connectivity does not only mean faster Facebook speed. Hindi lang po pang Facebook ang gamit ng internet para mag-troll. We also need this to ensure real-time monitoring of traffic. Katulad po, pag nanonood kayo ng mga news sa Amerika, halimbawa sa ibang bansa, o mga pelikula, pag nakikita nilang may emergency, merong central traffic control system na maaaring gawing green light lahat ng intersection with a touch of a button. Kailangan ganun din ang ating teknolohiya sa ating bansa at hindi yan malayo sa katotohanan kung atin lang bibigyan ng pagtutok. We also need this to make sure that people can work from homes. Kaya nga yung pagtatayo ng mga cell towers na bibilisan ay dapat natin payagan para mas mabilis ang internet speed. That's why we also support the bill of Senator Bam Aquino. Kailangan mabilis ang internet speed para yung iba na hindi na kailangan pumasok sa trabaho, sa bahay na lang. Kung pareho, pwede tayo mag-teleconference, video conferencing, at marami pa tayong mga kamag-anak sa abroad na matutuwa sapagkat mas mabilis ang pasok ng Skype at information sa kanila. First, we will allow the traffic manager and the implementing agencies to use the alternative methods of procurement under the existing law, RA 9184, by recognizing traffic congestion as a calamity that needs urgent solution. Our bills provide on procurement still remains faithful to RA 9184 with the addition that bonus incentives will be given to concessionaires who are able to complete their tasks at a shorter period of time. So ibig sabihin, kung mabilis pa nilang matatapos ang mga proyekto, merong incentive-based reward. Second, our bill prohibits the issuances of TROs and preliminary injunctions by lower courts. Thus, only the Supreme Court may issue a TRO para yung mga nuisance lawsuits mabawasan o maalis. Third, we intend to limit the number of licenses, permits, and certifications necessary to implement a priority project. Mantakin nyo, mismong gobyerno nahihirapan sa dami ng kailangan na permits para lang makapagpatayo ng infrastruktura. Ang gobyerno kumukuha ng permits sa iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno at natatagalan. Tayo mismo ang nagpapabagal sa sarili nating mga proyekto. And fourth, we shall expedite the acquisition of rights of way, project sites and relocation sites, but with safeguards. For example, we shall provide for additional funding for informal settler families who need to be relocated. Hindi naman pwedeng sasabihin natin magpapatayo tayo ng tulay, may mga nakatira pa doon at wala silang malilipatan. Kailangan may budget para realistic na makalipat ang ating mga kababayan. What about public utility vehicle operators who will be displaced due to the route rationalization scheme or other projects that will be implemented? Hindi po natin sila nakaligtaan. Mayroong mga social support mechanisms na tutulong at poprotekta sa kanila. Granting emergency powers to the President may be frowned upon by some, but the public need not worry since there will be a Congressional Oversight Committee that will monitor their every move. A report mechanism is likewise in place. These are in addition to the transparency provisions already found in the bill. Mr. President, while there are many things that this bill is about, there are equally many things that this is not. It is not the sole handbook to fix our traffic problems. It is but one of many. The Senate needs to do its part to help address the traffic crisis, but we also expect the Executive Department to do theirs. If this bill passes into law, then the Executive Department will no longer have any excuse and should stop pointing fingers as to its inability to address the traffic crisis in our country. I also appeal to our kababayans, sumunod po tayo sa batas trapiko. Huwag pumara sa gitna ng daan. Tumawid tayo sa tamang lugar kahit mas malayo pa ito sa kinaroroonan. Huwag mag-counterflow, etc. May mga pasaway rin na PUV and tricycle drivers na titigil sa unahan kahit green light na kasi kukuha pa ng pasahero o kaya naman gagawa ng terminal kung saan naman wala. Ang lakas natin magreklamo tungkol sa traffic pero tayo rin minsan ang sanhi. Huwag ganon. Hindi ninyo kailangan ng taong papalo sa inyo para lang madisiplina kayo. We should exercise self-discipline. I know that this bill will not undergo smooth sailing when it comes to the evaluation of this bill, but we are prepared to be able to answer and to be able to accept legitimate amendments that will really help in smoothing out the problem of traffic. I do hope that this chamber will do its part in supporting this measure that could eventually improve the traffic condition of our country. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Poe.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1284 under Committee Report Number 24.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Bill number 1284 under Committee Report number 24 is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Senate Joint Resolution number 5 under Committee Report number 25.
Is there any objection? There being none, we now transfer Joint Resolution number 5 under Committee Report number 25 from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider Senate Joint Resolution number 5 under Committee Report 25.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read only the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
Joint resolution increasing the monthly pension of the Social Security System pensioners under the Social Security Act of 1997.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask that the chairman of the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Senator Richard Gordon, be recognized.
Any objection? There being none, the hardworking chairman of numerous committees in the Senate, Senator Gordon, is hereby recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your kind words. You really mean overworked. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, your Committee on Government Corporations has had a couple of hearings on this matter. Couple of hearings simply because this bill was previously approved by the previous Congress, and the approval was based on a 2,000 peso across-the-board increase. Unfortunately, Mr. President, or rather fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which side of the fence you're on or you're in, the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Benigno Aquino III, vetoed this proposal to the chagrin of many, many folks. And so, when we took over, a number of senators have filed bills, and I will quote the bills that were filed here were as follows. Senators Recto, Villanueva, Trillanes, the fourth, Villar, Ejercito, Binay, Legarda, Soto III, Subiri, this representation, and Senator Gatchalian as authors of individual legislation, which is already on the board, Mr. President. Having said that, Mr. President, the Constitution states that the state shall from time to time review to increase the pensions and other benefits due to retirees of both the government and the private sector. This is Article 16, Section 8, 1987 Constitution, Mr. President. Having said that, Mr. President, the last increase that was given by the SSS was in 2014, which granted a 5% across the board increase, which really translates into 60 pesos. 60 measly pesos, Mr. President. And that's why I'm not astounded by the fact that the previous Congress came out with the bill for 2,000 pesos. Normally, Mr. President, this representation, and I believe many of us here, would not try to arrogate upon ourselves the responsibility of increasing the pensions. Why? Because we do not have current knowledge or current knowledge of the operations of the SSS, Mr. President. And they have a board. And by intervening and saying that we can increase the pensions by legislation, we are putting ourselves at risk as well as the government, because this will come out into budgetary support should we be mistaken. And precisely this is why I believe President Aquino vetoed the previous law on the matter, the previous proposal on the matter, which was already an enrolled bill at the time. But a lot of this pensioners, the senior citizens, who are reeling from the high cost of living, and for that matter, Mr. President, inflation has gone up so much that the 1,200 pesos of yesteryears is now amounts to about 580 pesos a year, Mr. President. And so there was a sense of urgency on both houses of Congress to indeed refile this and do so post haste. Since a lot of the discussions that already been made, the decision to be made was whether we are going to do it at 2,000. And when we announced that it was going to be at 2,000, the Department of Finance balked, the Social Security system balked. They have a new chairman of the Social Security Commission, and therefore, and the system, and they appealed, so we called another hearing, and in the process, we agreed that we would provide across-the-board increase of 1,000 pesos. However, the House said they wanted 2,000, but we were able to prevail upon them to do 1,000 first, to speak with the Speaker, Alvarez, as well as Secretary Dominguez, which cost me a day's absence here, if you will recall, being marked absent even if I was here. But nonetheless, Mr. President, they agreed, but they agreed to have a second tranche by the year 2019, Mr. President. And
the recommendation of your committee is indeed to give a first tranche by January this year and study the matter by June 2018, where we can recommend whether to increase it at some later date, Mr. President. Having said that, Mr. President, there is no argument that with the food and poverty threshold being the way it is, Mr. President, and according to the Philippine Statistics Authority, a family of 5 needs at least 6,365 pesos per month to meet the family's basic food needs, and at least 9,140 pesos per month to meet both basic food and non-food needs. An average pensioner receives 3,169, an amount way below the poverty threshold. Now, the issue of how long is the fund going to last if we're going to issue a 2,000 peso across the board increase? And the answer is the fund will last until 2042, Mr. President. It will be depleted by 2042. But a 1,000 peso increase by January 2017 will result in the fund lasting until 2032. Now, Mr. President, all this is really beside the point if we can muster, or rather the SSS can muster and the government can muster, the necessary political will. One, we could increase the contributions, Mr. President. Two, we can actually be more aggressive in collecting the SSS from employers and employees, Mr. President. Right now, the current SSS membership is 34 million. But it's woeful, however, that that they are only able to collect 38%, Mr. President. So it is indeed very, very sad that they are unable to collect this, and that is what I told them. After all, the board as well as the executive officials of the fund has very reasonable salaries, and they should have ample salaries. After all, Mr. President, they are handling the major retirement fund for the private sector in this country. Of course, Mr. President, the government can do its share. The government can provide more employment simply by spending the infrastructure money that has been allocated in our budget. The government can promote more for tourism so that and apply the tourism incentives that have been provided by the law that we crafted that created the TIESA. Tourism can easily generate jobs and therefore have more membership. Of course, the government can also make sure that the foreign direct investments, by the way, in a survey of people leaving, of investors coming from China, their preference is Vietnam, which I think got about 29%, or 39%, and the Cambodians got about 3%, and the Philippines got a measly 1%. Talo pa tayo ng Cambodia. But you can see on the chart that the Philippines gets $5.23 billion in foreign direct investments. Thailand has 10.84, Malaysia has 11.12, Vietnam has 11.80, Indonesia has 15.50 billion, and Singapore has 65.26 billion. A city-state the size of Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority gets more foreign direct investment. So you can see our cabinet members in the Department of Trade, Foreign Affairs, BOI, and the SBMA, and Clark, and all the other export processing zones must break out a sweat to make sure that they can increase that foreign direct investment. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. But I believe that they can do that because we did Subic with a zero-based investment, and we were able to get tremendous increases in foreign direct investments right away. Over about 2 or 3 billion pesos worth of investments was done in Subic Bay. Having said that, Mr. President, we must take a look also at the savings rate. Now, Senator Rector and I, the very able gentleman from Batangas who is the minority floor leader and an expert in our budget, and I were discussing about the matter of contributions. And I said these are really in the nature of forced savings. According to Mr. Recto, it is more of a tax, which can be interpreted that way, because after all, taxes are savings by the people, so that their tax pesos will go back to them in terms of infrastructure, in terms of schools, and other social aims by the government. But indeed, if you look at the savings rate of the Philippines in 2014 as a percentage of GDP, we again pale by comparison. The Philippines has 17.2%, Singapore has 53.4%, Indonesia has 33.8%, Malaysia 34.2%, Vietnam 30.1%, China 48.9%, South Korea 34.5%, Brunei, I should not include Brunei because Brunei is practically subsidized by their government, like Saudi Arabia subsidizes its citizens. Cambodia, we're at par with them, practically 17.6%, and Laos 20.9%. So much for the country that used to be Asia's #1, second only to Japan, in terms of direct investment. Mr. President, we are really still the laggard in terms of savings. That's why we would have to take a very big, strong higop ng hininga para aminin natin na kailangan natin ng political will para maitaas natin ang SSS. Because after all, ang GSIS mas mataas di hamak ang kanilang sinisingil kesa sa atin sa SSS. I believe they're almost double what we have here, and I'm trying to look for my notes, but I'm sure you can all agree that GSIS has a lot more contributions exacted. They're 21%, and SSS is really way below. They collect 11%, and you can see there on the chart the contribution rate, 11% for SSS, and GSIS 21%, and the employee is 33.3% sa SSS, 9% sa GSIS, and the employer is 66.7%, and GSIS is 11%. So, Mr. President, there are really serious repercussions when it comes to determining whether we should really do it by legislative fiat. My own take on the matter is it should be done by the business sector of SSS, the business side of SSS. That's why we give them high salaries to see to it that they can manage the fund. The other problem, of course, is the fact that the SSS has a lot of assets that are NPA, non-performing assets, Mr. President. Meaning to say that they have condominiums, they have 18 billion to be precise, and some of these condominiums include Bella Villa, 19 condo units, Pioneer Highlands, 51 condo units, Renaissance Tower, 3 condo units, that's a pretty high-end condo, Cyber One, 5 condo units, etc. You can see that a lot of investments can actually be liquefied, if you will, or for that matter, be used to be rented out. Therefore, in fact, forsaking 198 million pesos in income from rental income with a value of 18 billion pesos. So I'm already looking at Senator Recto looking at some of the pricier condominiums here because I think he needs some condominiums that for some of his extra offices that he needs in this in the Senate. But let me aside, Mr. President, let me just say that over and above the matter of condo units and sleeping assets is the fact that they must collect, and there are 2 suggestions here. Number 1, DOLE or the BIR, as per suggestion of Senator Recto once again, can help them in the collection. After all, the BIR can make visitation and they can make collections readily available to the BIR. Or for that matter, DOLE can help make sure that they push the employers to provide the contributions that have been very tardy and very slow and sluggish. And so, Mr. President, it is now that we have given you more or less the overview of some of the things that would have to deter the Congress of the Republic of the Philippines, the lower house, or the big house as they want to be called, said that they would have this joint resolution. The difference within this joint resolution is not that much, and I think we were discussing this with the Senate President earlier. Our resolution calls for, making haste slowly. Theirs is making haste, period, because it seems to be related to an activity in 2019. Many of the congressmen's terms will expire at that time, and they would want a pasalubong to the people of this country. So they'd rather have an immediate 1,000 peso increase over and above the 1,000 that we're going to give. The Senate, being the more the smaller house, if you will, if you are to be humble, says that we should discuss this in January of 2018, June 2018, whether we should grant a second tranche, which can come in either on 2019 or maybe thereafter. But as you can see, there are repercussions, and this will give us time to put pressure on SSS to see whether they're really stretching themselves to make sure that we can get the necessary money so that we could husband the resources of the SSS so that they can pay our people, our pensioners, a ridiculously low addition to the pension. I say that ridiculously because I think that it is really unrealistic what we give. And I think it is also unrealistic what we charge personally for contributions. Because after all, if we agree with Senator Rector and myself that these are for savings, then these savings will go a long way when they retire. So talagang nagtatabi na sila for retirement. And you can see, if the others can do it, Singapore, we were ahead of Singapore until 1959 when they woke up and they started catching up, or for that matter China, or for that matter Malaysia. We were all ahead of these people, but they bit the bullet and they exacted collections. Perhaps it's a question of marketing, Mr. President. As I advise the SSS, you should learn to market and not treat it as if it is a handout. I think they should market it as though if you want to retire well, what you put in is what you get back. So if you put in small, you get back small. There are, of course, other amendments made by Senator Soto, which I thought were rather good amendments, but I think we must have to wait, along with the others who have amendments, when we finalize whether we're going to decide in 2018 to provide the second tranche. And that's where I think the real bill will come in. At the moment, if we want to give our people a feel-good present, not just for Christmas, but for the year, at least the 2 million plus pensioners should be made aware of the fact that their Senate and their Congress has now provided 1 million and that we're going to do it on a joint resolution basis. I do not see any contradiction because whether we say we give it on 2019 and why we say that we're going to give it after consideration, we can still agree to do it in 2019 when we go on 2018 on the discussion on whether we're going to have a second tranche. So this is a resolution, Mr. President, that I think can proceed. And so I ask, in the interest of our people, and I'm saying this because they deserve it, this is what they gave to the system. It's time we give them a little bit of extra emoluments for this coming season of Christmas and the coming New Year. And so therefore, I'd like to ask our colleagues here to amend, to adopt this so that we can go ahead and announce it, that it be given by January at the latest, or possibly even at the earliest before the end of this year. I therefore implore to get this bill approved, Mr. President, or this resolution approved. Thank you very much.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, we move to recognize Senator Ralph Recto, the Minority Floor Leader.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Recto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, unfortunately, we were only told today that we would take up this measure on the floor. I would have wanted to be able to review further, considering the importance of this measure. But then I saw in the resolution as well that it would appear that if we don't pass this measure, we may not be able to give the 1,000 pesos to all pensioners and retirees by January, the additional benefits that they deserve. First of all, let me state for the record, Mr. President, that I am one of the principal authors of this bill. In fact, the first to file it. But there's a difference as far as my version is concerned. I did file a reform measure as far as the SSS is concerned. In fact, it's been 20 years since we've looked at the charter of the SSS. And I think the government is doing it the wrong way, Mr. President. Can you imagine we first adopted, for both the SSS and the GSIS, in the case of the government, Mr. President, what should have been done first was tax reform from left to right. That would improve the take-home pay, then pass on SSL, then there will be an implication on the pension. Today, what we are doing is the current administration adopted the executive order of the former president on the SSL, and there's a proposal to reduce taxes
Income taxes.
without looking at the implication on the pensions. Here we are today talking about one side of the pension scheme for the private sector, the SSS. And there's no discussion today as far as the GSIS is concerned. Now, having said all of that, Mr. President, and that's why I'd like to look into the charter of the SSS and the GSIS. Having said that, Mr. President, my first question, and I support the measure, by and large, Mr. President. And I'm very glad to hear from the chairman of the committee as well, that he promises that at the next time we will discuss it, it will be the reform measure. And this is a temporary measure, as he mentioned earlier, Mr. President. So let me begin by asking, Mr. President, first, why is it a resolution and not a bill?
Principally, Mr. President, because both sides agree on the general principles, and that I really feel that it should be a resolution instead of a bill, because a bill means that we are intruding into the into SSS, where the government pays experts to husband the resources. And if we put our own mark on it by saying you should pay this much, I would say that should really be a last resort if we know that there are indeed a lot of resources. But otherwise, they're under pressure. In fact, they were willing to announce it before, but they said mabuti nang gawin ng Kongreso na kayo na sa inyo naman galing para hindi na kami mag-a-announce, para meron naman lahat tayo pare-parehong nagawa. And so therefore, Mr. President, if it were to be a bill, marami pa tayong pag-uusapan dyan. It will go to the period of amendments, which we can do to see here. But the resolution shows the fact that this is really just a palliative measure for the moment. And I promised the committee, as well as the Senate, that we're going to go into the more substantive measures that would be involved in SSS reform and GSIS reform. But right now, this is smarting from the veto of President Aquino of a bill that was already approved by both houses of Congress for 2000. In fact, this shows that we are moderate in the sense that we're going to be more responsible rather than irresponsible by coming in and saying 1,000 muna to be sure that SSS does its job and improves on the measures that I suggested just a while ago.
Okay, Mr. President, I don't see the logic between the difference of a bill and a resolution insofar as intrusion is concerned, Mr. President.
Pareho naman.
Insofar as a total reform measure, I suppose a bill will be more appropriate
That's
than a
correct.
resolution. I agree with the gentleman there. But whether it would have been a bill without amendments to the charter or a resolution, it is still intrusive insofar as the finances of SSS is concerned, right?
Which the SSS agreed to.
Yes. In this case, the SSS agreed to 1,000 pesos.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, now having said that, Mr. President, what happens if we do not pass this resolution? Will it stop the SSS from giving this 1,000 on January?
No, Your Honor.
It will not.
It will not.
Meaning to say that the SSS, with or without this resolution, the SSS, probably its board has already agreed as well, na ibigay na yung 1,000. Now, I agree with the gentleman earlier when he said that the reason why Congress intervened in the previous Congress is walang ginagawa ang SSS. Masyadong mababa yung pensyon na binibigay. Kaya nakialam ang Kongreso. Ngayon, kung ginagawa nila yung trabaho nila, hindi dapat pakikialaman ng Kongreso. And that's why Congress intruded. Now,
Mr. President, I just want to make a manifestation.
With the permission of the two gentlemen, Senator Villar.
Because I
Proceed.
was the one who passed that bill last Congress when I was chairman of the Committee on Government-Owned and Controlled Corporation. It was not a responsibility on our part to pass that bill. That bill was based on a 7,000 peso increase, which was filed by the House of Representatives, and they really nag-compromise by passing a 2,000 peso
but
increase.
in the Senate, I also had a bill in the last Congress.
Yes. And at the same time, we looked at the collection of SSS, and it's 38%, when in previous years, it's 70%. So I thought that they are not really working to collect more. So a bill that will give more to pensioners will force them to work more so that they can provide well for the pensioners. And at the same time, as what our sponsor said, for a family to provide for food in a family of 5, you should have a salary of 6,300. And the smallest pension in the SSS is 1,200. So everyone is living and living below the poverty line. So it's not a good sign for people working 10 years and 20 years in the private sector to receive something that is below the poverty line. We're giving more. We are just giving the same thing to CCT beneficiaries who are not working. And we are penalizing those who work and they receive only 1,200 a month. So I thought that in this country, you're sending a bad signal that it's better not to work because you will receive more from your government than working 10 to 20 years and you will receive 1,200 a month. So with that consideration, we passed that bill in the last Congress. So I thought it will be a good encouragement for people to work because they will receive more from the government if they work than if you are just a CCT beneficiary. So I just want to make that manifestation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, following the line of the distinguished lady from Las Piñas, is precisely why I filed this bill on the total reform measures for the SSS. There are many provisions in that bill allowing them to invest in certain activities, halimbawa, addressing certain concerns such as, for example, today there is a cap. Up to 16,000 pesos lang your contribution based on your salary. Meaning to say, the richest man in the Philippines, Henry C's contribution to SSS, and probably his driver, paid the same amount. Hanggang 16,000 lang yung contribution. Pangalawa, this bill was done 20 years ago. And during those days, iba yung concept pa ng pension. Iba na rin yung concept kayo ng pension. Halimbawa, following again from the line of Senator Villar, your pension should be based on how much you put in is what you get back in return.
Sorry?
Philosophically speaking, Mr. President, the more you put in, the more you should be able to get back in return.
Excuse me to the gentleman.
Yes.
Senator Recto, you intend to interpolate now, so we will formally open the period for interpolation. Because I thought
That is what we are doing, Mr. President.
I thought you were only making a manifestation. So, if there's
No,
no
I
objection,
stood to be recognized to interpolate on the measure,
okay,
Mr.
so if there's no objection, we are now into the interpolation period of this measure.
Yes.
Make that of record.
Yeah, and let me continue,
Proceed.
Mr. President. I do not wish to delay the passage also of this resolution. I just wanted the minority to put its points on the floor, make a few manifestations during the period of interpolation as well. No? So, bakit 1,000 lang naman? Why not 1,500? Why not 2,000? Why 1,000?
Mr. President, we'll cut to the chase.
Yes.
There were negotiations between this representation, the Congress, Mr. Lavinia, the commissioner, new commissioner, talked to me about this, and I spoke also with the chairman. Mr. President, I rejected the fact that they were holding us hostage. Hindi naman siguro yun ang intention, but I found that that was where it was going. That they would agree to increase, provided that we allow them in their charter, and this is part of Senator Recto is talking about, and I agree with it, but not as a parang we're being held hostage. Now, for example, they want increase in monthly salary credit ceiling. They want enactment of standalone laws, such as making compulsory for public-private partnership proponents or operators to grant the SSS the right of first refusal to invest up to 25% in equity participation in all PPP projects. Meaning to say that if they invested there, instead of getting only 2% from the bank or from the market, if they invested it, they can get as much as 12%, certainly more than 2%, and sky could be the limit. Of course, we would have to oversee that very well, because this is SSS money, people's hard-earned savings. Authorizing, and B, authorizing the Commission to condone penalties. In other words, they would no longer have to go to Congress to...
I agree with the gentleman. The SSS is asking for too much. I agree with you. I support some of their initiatives, but not all of them.
I agree with you.
And I've seen those already, those proposals in the previous Congress as well.
And, Mr. President, they also want amendments to the SSS Charter, which we are going to do. I agree with the gentleman from Batangas that we should really look into the charter of SSS and GSIS so we could enact the proper reform measures. That the gentleman is correct when he says pension is differently, there's a different definition now than in yesteryears. No? And then they would like to see such other measures as Congress Commission will deem it necessary to ensure the viability and sustainability of the SSS fund. That's motherhood. But nonetheless, Mr. President, I don't think, that's why I don't want to intervene, because it becomes a trade-off. It is not a trade-off.
It should not be a trade-off, Mr.
It is
President.
not a trade-off.
I
and
agree.
They must run that fund well with the end in view of providing as much stretch of the savings of our people when they retire, to be given when they retire.
Incidentally, Mr. President, the chairman is correct when he says this is a forced savings mechanism. It is essentially also a payroll tax.
That's correct.
Kaltas sa sweldo ho to di ba? For the purpose of providing pension. Okay, now, having said that, again the question, Mr. President, bakit 1,000 lang? Bakit hindi 1,500, example?
Because every time you increase, Mr. President, there is a concomitant threat to the viability of the fund. And to be safe, we agreed on 1,000 muna.
Yeah. 1,000 is how much? How many pensioners are there, Mr. President?
There are 32 million, for this fund of 2 million pensioners.
2 million. So at 1,000, magkano
Retirees.
yun? Magkano yun kung 1,000 pesos?
That's about 2 billion ba? 2 billion.
A month.
A month.
A month.
24 billion a year.
Kung may 13 month, di 26.
Correct.
So what is the figure? Is it 24? Is it there 13 month? Now, that assumes across the board. Kasi maraming klaseng pensioners din eh.
Yeah, meron above.
In fact, what is the minimum pension today?
1,200.
And then, what is the average pension? What is the maximum pension? How many
Maximum
for each
pension right now is
category?
about 3,200 ang pension, I think.
More or less, the average.
2,400.
I think the average is roughly 3,169.
That's what I said the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Now, and the highest is about 17,000.
I am not too sure about those figures, but I believe it is 17,481 a month.
More or less, that's right. Okay.
Yes.
Maraming klaseng pensioners din, ha? Here, because we're only talking about across the board.
That's correct.
Meron naman yung, kung pensioners sa senior citizens lang, ilan lang yon?
Pensioners and senior citizens,
Of the 2 million. Iba naman kasi survivorship pa eh. In fact, it need not be across the board. For
These
those
are
who need
actually
it most, we
retirees.
can give a higher amount.
These
For
are
the same
retirees.
amount of money, yes.
Palay retirees yan.
Correct, oo. Meron naman yung namatay na pero may survivor. di
Oh
ba?
yeah, of course.
Okay. So there's a lot of types of pensioners, Mr. President, no? In fact, we can be, you could probably do 2,000 for one, 500 for the other, 1,500, depending on the situation of the pensioner.
That's correct.
Okay? But here, parang, and I'm not blaming the committee chairman, ha? Baka yung SSS, tamad na naman eh. Gusto, isang across the board lang eh.
Believe you me, Mr. President, I'm even willing to meet with them monthly, so just to make sure that they're on. You know, I'm always one that will want to monitor the performance of not only the police, which I submitted in my
Yes.
report,
Yes.
in far as killings every month in every province, but I'm willing to make sure that they submit to us their performance every month, so
Yeah.
that we can oversight them.
Mr. President, you mentioned that the SSS has how many members?
34 million,
How many of them are paying?
38% lang.
So roughly 12 million.
That's correct.
Okay. And what is the value today of SSS?
Sorry?
What is the total assets of SSS today?
Total assets, saan yan?
About 450 billion, thereabouts.
474 billion.
Yeah, about 434 billion. Now, considering the base of SSS, kung 33 million members yan, 12 million paying, how many members does GSIS have?
GSIS has, ano na yung GSIS? Ilan na GSIS employees? One moment, Mr. President.
No, income lang, income.
Binigay
They're not
sa inyo
even
kanina.
touching the reserves. Sa totoo lang. Kalokohan din.
I'm afraid it's not readily available, but the rate is 9.1 employees, 9.1%, and 11.1% ang contribution ng government. So about 22%.
No, what I'm saying is that 12 million paying members SSS, 33 million members, more than kulang-kulang 900,000 establishments paying for these members, right? And yet, their assets is only 470 billion. Ang GSIS, 2 million lang eh. Double the rate, 2 million, but how much are the assets of GSIS?
I don't have that readily, Mr.
Roughly 900 billion. Now, all of these are what you call sovereign wealth funds. In fact, as I suggested during the budget deliberations here, dapat when we discuss the budget, dapat kasama ang SSS at GSIS. You combine the two, not to mention Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, you're talking about more than 1.8 trillion pesos.
There should be nothing that prevents us from doing that.
Precisely, and that's why if change is coming and we discuss the budget here at 3.4 trillion every year, we should be discussing that during budget deliberations as well. And that's why in some of our amendments, just like in Singapore, kailangan, there's many things that you can do with the SSS and GSIS. And I propose under our proposal to invest in infrastructure, yung PPP. And that's why they submitted that to you, because they see the merit of this recommendation. Bakit natin iiwan sa pinakamayayamang pamilya lang ang investment dyan? Bakit hindi natin payagan yung taxpayer natin, yung contributors natin sa SSS, GSIS, to own the toll roads that we have? And then ang dating pa niyan, they will use the facility knowing that they own the facility anyway. Mas malaki ang kikitain ng SSS, mas malaki ang kikitain ng GSIS, owned by Filipinos, made by Filipinos, financed by Filipinos, at alam nila when they retire, mapupunta pa sa kanilang pera, at madadagdagan natin ng hindi lang 1,000 yung pensyon ng ating mga senior citizens.
I have no disagreement with the gentleman on that score. In fact, the only thing I would do is that they must do extraordinary diligence all the time, so that we don't lose the money. If I remember correctly, and I hope the gentleman can...
Remember, these PPP projects are government guaranteed.
That's correct.
The treasury bill, how many percent of the SSS money goes to treasury bills? And how much are they making from that? Government guaranteed din yun. Pero yung mga PPP, government guaranteed din yan.
Well, the only reason why I said extraordinary diligence, because at one time, one president, I believe, used his influence at SSS to invest at a particular favorite... I don't have the data right now, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, and I'm not proposing that they
I think that
invest...
was Bell Resources.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they invest in non-blue chip.
That's correct.
Yun, non-blue chip yun eh.
Baka nga sumobra, lumampas sa buwan eh. Yan ang importante.
I understand that, Mr. President. And I know that some of this we will discuss at a later date.
Of course.
But, you know, the point is, how much money did they make in 2014? I have the financial statement here of SSS. They made 47 billion pesos. So it would have been easy for Pinoy to give the 2,000 then. In fact, it is not true that their reserves will be hit yung by 2042. That's assuming all things being constant.
I failed to say that, but that's what I wanted to say. I was delivering my remarks extemporaneously, but I thought this was going to come out. And all things being equal, not moving, talagang yun ang mangyayari.
Correct.
Kaya nga, inuna ko na lahat, Mr. President, yung mga reforms na dapat gawin para makahabol sila.
Correct.
And if they don't do that, then talagang dapat palitan.
But you know, I value the position also of the chairman of being very prudent with this taxpayers' money also with the SSS, no? Kaya 1,000 lang. No? So, ito bang 1,000, what? So how much is it? 24 billion or 26 billion?
Excuse me?
So, itong 1,000 across the board for 2 million people is, what is the amount? 24 billion? 26?
I understand it's going to be 24 billion. I don't think this includes 13-month pay.
Okay, so 24 billion. So, kung 1,5, 36.
That's correct.
Eh, ang kinita nila 47 eh.
That's a straight line computation.
Kung ang kinita nila 47, 36, meron mang dagdag na 11 na mapupunta lang sa reserve fund. So kung ang reserve fund nila is 444 plus 11 na naman yung next year, hindi mababawasan yung reserve fund.
That's correct. Sila 48 billion kung talagang 2 taon.
Di ba? So 1,5 yun. So, are you sure 1,000 lang ang gusto natin ibigay? Hindi
No, no, no,
1,500?
no, no, no. You know,
Hindi tatamaan, ha?
I am a hawk insofar as that is concerned, although I'm very conservative. I had a different reason. If we force the issue at 2,000, sabi ko nga una.
I'm not talking about 2,000.
No,
I'm
no,
saying
I'm talking about
1,500.
2,000, just to show you.
Oh,
If
why
we
not
force the issue-
1,250?
If we force the issue at 2,000, aangal sigurado yan, then mapipilitan sila na talaga mag-tighten ang belt at talaga maging aggressive in talagang growing the fund. But right now, they're all complacent. This is the biggest sickness of this country apart from
that's
all of
why-
us having eye problems.
That's why I support the position of Senator Villar. Para tulakin natin sila magtrabaho. 38% lang. And I filed also in the bill, which I included also. Halimbawa, kung ikaw negosyante ka, why should I have a check payment every month, SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, BIR? Bakit sa tingin mas mataas ang compliance sa BIR kaysa sa SSS? Kasi, yung BIR may visitorial powers. Yung SSS, wala. It would appear. Kaya hindi sila nakakolekta. Okay? So bakit hindi lang isang cheque bayaran sa BIR? BIR ngayon magbigay sa SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth. You cut red tape pa in government. Di ba?
The gentleman
Then
can suggest visitorial powers as well for the SSS. After all, you're protecting under the Constitution the welfare of the
Correct.
many who are employed. We can do that in the reform measures that we are going to submit.
Correct. But that's the point I'm trying to drive at, Mr. President. no?
The point is made
Yeah,
clear very well.
thank you very much. So, I will not delay the discussion on this, no? But I look forward next year to discussing the entire reform measures of both the GSS, GSIS, and the SSS, the total pension scheme, next year. And there are many things that we can do as a country to move the economy even faster, and that way provide our senior citizens more benefits when they retire. Mr. President, isipin mo, ang daming pera ditong idle. 470 billion in SSS. A big portion of that you can use for investment.
Mr. President, I agree.
GSIS,
I
another
agree
900
wholeheartedly
billion.
with the gentleman from Batangas. And let me just say, nakakahiya nga eh. And I've said this during the committee hearings. Nakakahiya nga dahil this is what we can give the senior citizens. I mean, the whole point of pensions is because not only is it savings, but so that you assure them that they would have a dignified life when they retire. And for all the people that get paid so much and get increases so much, I really castigated them and said, my gosh, you better produce. Because if we cannot produce, then we should remove you.
Yeah. Just one final point, Mr. President. Ang sabi ng gobyerno kahapon, sabi ng NEDA, ang unemployment rate daw bumaba to 4.6%. Okay? Below 5%, theoretically, that is already like 100% employment.
Full employment.
Theoretically. Sa economics po. 95% employment rate is already full employment. Theoretically. Now, kung totoo yun, na 95.4% are employed, bakit 12 million lang nagko-contribute sa SSS? Di dapat, ibig sabihin, more than 40 million ang nagko-contribute. Because you're mandated. These are all mandates. Now, ang daming pwedeng tanungin sa SSS eh. Ilan yung dapat na nagbabayad ng business establishments?
Including domestics,
Yeah.
drivers.
Sa amin, bayad.
Sa akin na bet.
May dagdag pa.
Hindi na
May bonus
papadagdag.
sa amin eh. Now, anyway, having
I'm
said that,
sure-
Mr.
I'm sure.
President, having said that, Mr. President, I look forward to discussing the total reform measures of the pension system. Next year, pangsamantala, Merry Christmas muna, and I will vote in favor of the resolution, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you,
President,
Senator Recto.
may we move for a few minutes suspension.
There's no objection, we suspend the session.
It's either that or sense of the Senate.
O, kailangan another day yun. Hindi pwede, wala tayong order. Kaya mo sila magbago sa rules. Proposal rules na doon. Hindi, gagawin na ng SSS na paulit tayo. It is the sense. Nasaan yung title? Anong title? No. Immediately. Immediately.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, to give time for the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Joint Resolution Number 5 under Committee Report Number 25.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Richard Gordon.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Gordon
in
is
view-
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. In view of the urgency of the matter, in the light of the season, and we'd like to end the year right and begin the new year right. This representation, in behalf of the Senate, would like to manifest that we express the sense of the Senate to increase the monthly pension of all SSS pensioners by 1,000 pesos effective immediately, Mr. President. And this will be subject to style.
Majority Leader,
Mr. President, subject to style, I move to approve the resolution.
there is a motion to approve a resolution expressing the sense of the Senate, just stated by Senator Gordon, subject to style. Any objection? There being no objection, the motion for the calling for the immediate increase across the board for all SSS pensioners in the amount of 1,000 pesos, effective immediately, is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, Majority Leader Senator Villanueva is raising his
I'd like to
hand.
thank all the members of the Senate for
Mr.
being
President,
Santa Claus this
may we
season.
recognize Senator Joel
Thank you,
Villanueva.
Senator Gordon. Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to put on record my this representation's short manifestation in the light of the subject matter that we were discussing a while ago, and I am very proud to be voting in favor of the sense of the Senate in expressing our sentiment to more than 2.15 million beneficiaries that would receive additional 1,000 pesos that will give them at least 2,200 as part of the pension. I'd like to congratulate also the chairperson of the committee who raised this issue. I was there. It was actually a joint committee hearing which he failed to recognize. But I'm very happy, Mr. President, and thankful that the chair is very focused and concentrated in this particular issue. I remember there were about 5-6 options available, was laid down during the hearing, and again, without prejudice to tackling the issues we were discussing a while ago. This representation would like to put on record that I will actively participate, Mr. President, in the upcoming debates. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations again to the committee chair.
Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Sani Angara.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader. Just a short manifestation in relation to this simple resolution we have adopted and the joint resolution which we'll be continue debating next year. I just want to share with the body that I had a meeting with Secretary Dominguez of the Department of Finance this morning, and he said that an increase in pensions of across the board of 1,000 pesos would have the following effects. Firstly, Mr. President, it would reduce the reserve life of the SSS from 2042 to 2028. I see the very brilliant minority leader shaking his head. So I'm just putting this on the record, and we don't have to take it hook, line, and sinker, but I think it's something to consider for the committee going forward and for the authors of the measures to amend the SSS, Mr. President. Of course, certainly the long-term viability of the SSS is something we should be concerned about. And the second concern he shared with me is that by 2018, we would be breaching the 3% deficit to GDP ratio. And by 2022, assuming their projections hold true, we would hit about 3.3% of deficit to GDP ratio. And he feels, in his opinion, that's treading dangerous ground because those two circumstances put together might give the ratings agencies pause to consider downgrade, a possible downgrade for us. So I really support the aims of the good chair of the Government Corporations Committee in pushing for this very noble measure. But going forward, I hope these are factored into the debate, and I trust in his abilities in overseeing the course and direction of the reform, Mr. President. So congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Angara.
Mr. President, based on an earlier manifestation of Senator Grace Poe, I move to transfer the primary referral of proposed Senate Resolution number 55 from the Committee on Public Services to the Committee on Science and Technology.
There is a motion to transfer the referral of proposed Senate Resolution number 55 to the Committee on Science and Technology. Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, consequently, I move that proposed Senate Resolution number 55 be considered in Committee Report number 19, filed by the Committee on Science and Technology, sponsored earlier by Senator Bam Aquino.
There is a motion for the proposed Senate Resolution number 55 to be deemed considered under Committee Report number 19. Is that the motion, Majority Leader?
That's
Any
correct, Mr.
objection?
President.
There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, before the final motion for this year, may we listen to the Christmas message of the Senate President.
My dear colleagues, I have prepared a year-end message to all of you, but due to the lateness of the hour, I have decided to simply request that this be inserted into the records. But I'd like to thank, of course, the members of the majority for your hard work and support, and the members of the minority for your hard work and critical collaboration. We have had a very productive year. In fact, the Senate has a satisfaction rating as of September 2016 of 52%. Very high. And congratulations to all of us for that rating, and also for being part of an historic year, the 100th year of the Philippine Senate. So, Merry Christmas to all my colleagues. Merry Christmas to all of our staff, all of our employees here in the Senate. Have a good rest, and by next year, we will be back to our hardworking ways, and I will call for an early caucus next year so we can pinpoint and identify priority measures which we will pursue in a very focused manner in our January to March 2017 session. So Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you very much, Majority Leader, for giving me the time.
Mr. President, there being no other matters, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, January 16, 2017.
Since we are going to resume January 16, can I greet the Minority Leader, Senator Recto, an advanced happy birthday? So, is there any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, January 16, 2017.